Good evening, everybody. This is Chairman Mike McCoo. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the School Building Committee for February 1st, 2023 at 6:33 p.m. Our first order of business, now that we're up and running, is present to speak. Just a note, comments may be limited in time to allow all present to speak. So we'll start within the room. Someone,
John Blessington, 29 Mason Road. I spoke to this committee on the January 18th meeting and asked that my remarks of that night be included in the minutes. I sent a transcript of that speech to the committee the following day. I see in the minutes of that meeting, there's only a summary of what I said. The members of the committee have still not seen my remarks, although it is now almost a month since I sent my survey in. This is ridiculous. The summary in those minutes do not cover many of the important issues that I covered, especially the issue of conflict of interest. I'm not going to repeat those charges tonight. Anyone who on the committee wants to see them should have a copy of the survey package you were given. Anyone who is not a member of the committee need but to ask me, and I will be happy to email them a copy. The last two sentences in those minutes were accurate about my remarks. I stated that I felt the school building committee had not been following their charge or mission. I suggested dismissing the school building committee, void its findings, and appoint a new committee, ensuring that none of them had a conflict of interest. I still think that would be the best option. Meanwhile, well over 100 surveys have been received from over the last month, many of them with written comments. Rather than distribute them to the members of the committee as they came in, they have been held until yesterday when they were distributed. Tonight was on the schedule to have the project selection. That means members of the committee have 2 days to read, digest, and if necessary, research the item on these surveys. Should not the members of the committee also discuss this input among themselves at a public meeting? There is simply not enough time. At the very least, project selection needs to be tabled for at least one meeting. Thank you.
I just want to comment on one thing for your accuracy. Your comments are a matter of the record in multiple locations, just so you're aware. We'll go online. Is there anyone present to speak online? Nick, Tella.
And Nick Tella, 49 Myrtle. I just want to start off again with another board that had their mic muted before the start. I think it's inappropriate to have it muted. If you can hear the sidebar in the office, in the room, then the people online should be able to hear sidebar too. I also want to state that, Ralph and the committee handled the 26th meeting very well. I was very concerned on some of the limitations that were trying to be pushed, but Ralph allowed people to speak, and I think that was awesome of him to do so. I think it was very clear on the 26th that the town is not ready for either of these projects. It was very clear. I think the committee should step back and maybe send the changes to the town to vote on, to change the charge to include all options, so everybody's very well aware of the cost. Right now, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back in the room. Good.
Charles Kearns, 248 Holland Turnpike. So after being at the meeting last Thursday, I heard a lot of good arguments. I probably would say 60-40 in favor of against a new school. I still have my viewpoint that we shouldn't undertake either project because we just can't afford it. The interest rates have gone up. People live by credit cards, paycheck to paycheck. And now the interest rates on credit cards, the average interest rate is now like 20%, even if you have a good credit score. I do okay for myself, can pay my bills off on time. Many people in this town cannot. They cannot afford an increase in taxes for either project. I think we should put everything on hold until the economy gets better, until interest rates go down, until the cost of materials go down. I see nothing but disaster happening if we undertake either of these options. I think we should postpone the referendum, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Back online. No hands up online. If you don't have the ability to raise your hand, I did get an email that someone didn't have the ability to raise their hand online. If that's the case for anyone out there, please unmute and call out your name if you'd like to speak during present to speak. All right, seeing no one online, any more in the room?
Unit test 11 Meadow Lane. Well, I am very concerned about the economical condition of our town. And not just our town, I would like you to look at everything from a point of what's going on in the country. This week, there are lots of information comes out, the level of inflation, the unemployment, and everyone, all the professionals, whoever you're listening online, they say this year we cannot really see the true numbers, especially towards unemployment, just because those COVID incentives, they are still there at work. People are still okay, and companies are okay out of COVID incentives, out of the money which were released by the government. As soon as that money are gone, they expect tremendous unemployment because the companies will start closing up. So our town is a small town. I represented last time when I was here, I represented the older people. I still would like to represent them. We, of course, we can make a priority and say, hey, this is an idea. And this is a great idea. I totally agree, it's a great idea. And I believe that many people here move by their idea. And when you have an idea, it's very easy to move with that. Those who know me, they know. So we might have different ideas. But sometimes you do have to step away from the idea and to see as a person. Okay, so we are talking at this point that the rather substantial category of people in our town, those who are retired, those who lived in this town, gave all their life to this town, 60 years, 70 years living in this town, working in this town, paying taxes, we're really kicking them out. Really, all the retired people, we put them on the edge of their not even happy, but sustainable life. They will not have a sustainable life. They will have a lack in everything. So I just want you to understand that it's not just you supporting ideas that would be great to have. It would be great to have new school and business developed, everything. We could have lots of good stuff here. And it's a good idea, but it's not for this particular time and not for the demographic of our town. I'm talking just about older people. How about the younger people? How about if all those professionals in economics who are very loudly talking that we can get really hit next year with unemployment? We are talking about a huge percentage of people not being able to support themselves. You are talking about increasing taxes, guys. So at this point, I'm not a proud person. I am happily to say, humbly, I am just begging you, please reconsider. Please, as I mentioned before, my family, thank you, Lord, is standing well. I still don't want to pay it. Tell you the truth, because I have at this point, I'm not sure what's gonna come. Okay, my husband has a good job. I don't know about next year. I don't know. So I don't want to have a burden for the next 20 years and thinking, do I have to move? Do we have to do? Okay, my age people, we can move. How about 65 years old? It's not that easy to move. They compare moving with a fire. It's the same as to have a fire in the house. And we want those, I have neighbors who are older people, they probably have many years ahead, but they're sick, Parkinson, whatever else is there, they're not gonna move. But I'm not sure if they can pull this out. What is they gonna do? So I want you to see the human factor in all this. It would be great to have a great school, great facility for the town. I don't think the price for it is really worth it. Really, I just want you all, just like open your heart towards your neighbor, because it's really about your neighbors. I'm just begging you, please see your neighbor, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Okay, one more check online. Okay, Steph, are you trying to get our attention?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I would just, thank you, Steph Summers, 4Y Road. I would just like to say that I believe that over the long stretch of grappling with our aging schools, there have always been concerns about the economics. I actually think looking at short-term economic pictures right now it's not really pertinent, because this project, if it sails, will start slow and amp up over a period of years during a potential recovery if we really are poised for a recession right now. I don't think that means it's the wrong time. I think it may very well be the right time in the lifetime of a 20-year bond. So I think I've never known these kind of discussions to be favorable about the economic cost or the risk of going into a big project and a big commitment like this. I understand those fears. I think Willington hasn't had a long experience with this kind of decision, because we did have a gift of a school that's now 100 years old that meant for decades and decades of the history here, people did not have to think about building schools and retiring bonds. And I think that there's a big fear of the unknown. I just feel like a faith that we will consider all those difficult factors and be able to meet this obligation to educating our youth in a positive way that will have minimal harm to people in the long run. And I hope that you'll weigh all the issues that I know you guys have been grappling with. And I've been impressed with the depth that the SBC has taken. And I just encourage you to use your best heads and your best hearts and go with what your guts are telling you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else online? Back in the room? Good.
Thursday, I raised the issue of the total, looking at the total.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you just announce your name so
Oh, I'm
people
sorry.
online and the record shows?
Elaine Newcomb, 28
Thank you.
Fairview Road. I raised the issue of the total hope to-do list that the town has, and pointed out that I think that the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the School Building Committee have to kind of look at that total price tag, the drainage problems, the roads, emergency services, possibly police coverage at some point. There's an awful lot of things that, and people constantly said, it's on the CIP list and we put it off, and we put it off year after year. To look at the school project in isolation is unrealistic, because it's going to be part of a total budget. And as I mentioned in my letter Thursday, I think there has to be a position taken and some assessment by those three boards as to what would the total budgets, that which you're asking the town to pass, what would that actually be once all of these things are looked at? And I know we're like, what, maybe 2 months away from a rudimentary budget. Maybe it's not finished, but I think there are large things that are known quantities, and they're either in the municipal budget or they're not in the municipal budget. And all of these things are competing for the tax dollars of the people. And Elena mentioned, you know, people being able to afford, might have, you know, can't afford to live here. Where are people gonna move? And we keep hearing about such a housing shortage, and I don't know where seniors are gonna go and live cheaper than they're living in their own homes here, because any, you know, facilities are expensive and require a lot of cash. So anyway, that's the big picture is what I'm concerned with, and I don't know, will there be any look at the totality of projects before this goes to referendum? So there be anything from either the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance that says, here's the.
We don't do question and answer in present to speak. Is that the conclusion of your comments? Okay. Anybody else in the room?
David Granick, 22 Willington Hill Road. Yeah, everybody's worried about what their school's gonna do to their property taxes. My calculations is it's gonna cost me about $2,000 more a year to live here. For what reason? Just so we can have one roof for all the kids. You also gotta remember the economy is not good. I've got a buddy right now that's in South Carolina, all flatbeds. He can't find a load. If you watch the trucks that are on the highway, there's not that many trucks out there. That's an indication of how the economy's doing. When they're not running, you're not getting any products delivered. And the supply chain is terrible. Now you're looking at steel, you're looking at building materials, you may not get. It might take 2 years, 3 years to get your structural steel. So you're pushing this to everybody right away, but the way the economy is, it's not worth it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Going back online, Nick.
Nick Teller, 49 real quick. The other concern I have is during the CIP meeting, there was mention of the fire department trying to hop on the school bond to build their project. I have a lot of concern that there's other outside projects trying to hop on the school bond. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Anybody else online?
Yeah, Mike, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Lisa, EM 38 Timber Lane. I just really want to encourage the committee to move forward with an opportunity for the townspeople to vote. I feel like these meetings, it's the same people making the same arguments. The people who are interested in seeing the school move forward are people who are busy with their kids and they're busy with their jobs and they have other things to do. And these meetings keep getting derailed by comments that we're not ready, this is being rushed, and it's time to bring this to a vote. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, last call in the room, present to speak. Good.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Gordon. I'm the state senator for Willington. I just wanted to say hi. I'm not here to tell you in Willington what to do. I leave that up to the people in the town, but I just want to let you know I have been following the issue. And whatever gets decided by the people in town as the state senator, I'm happy to be of help, do what I can then do to work with you all and partner and see what to do to move things forward. So that's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. I just wanted to let people know, and certainly can reach out to me anytime, especially once things hopefully get decided, and I can do whatever I can do to help with issues, especially on the state level, as far as if it comes to any trying to push for funding and things like that. So I just wanted to let folks know who I am. Some of you do know, so it's good to see you, but also offer my help as best as I can do with the state helping the town.
Thank you. All right, last call in the room. Last call online. All right, let's move on to chairperson reports. All right, first of all, I want to thank Ralph for running the forum on the 26th. He got late notice that I was not going to be able to rearrange my family schedule for a commitment I had, and he was already well prepared and jumped right in. So I want to thank him again for steering the ship that night.
A lot of fun, Mike.
It all is, right? It's public service in a nutshell.
Yes.
All right, so here's the rest of my report. We as a committee are at a critical point in our journey. I've been thinking it through over and over. It's personal for me because this is my hometown, because I graduated from Willington Public Schools, because it's a really important task with huge ramifications, no matter which direction this goes, including if a referendum fails. In my 55 years living here and 40 years of volunteer service to Willington, including the fire departments, countless committees, boards, projects, my feeling of accomplishment is through service. I don't like to let anyone down, especially the next 50 to 100 years of school children. The backlash around this project, especially in social media, weighs on me a lot, but I also use it as motivation to ask myself if we're missing something or we haven't seen another side of an issue. So I've been doing my own Q&A in preparation for this meeting. I've asked myself, does the committee membership care enough about this task and the community to serve it properly? And I feel very sure the committee members do. I've asked myself, have we shared our own expertise and acquired outside expertise? We already know the resumes of the people on the committee. We know who we've brought in. We've hired 2 different consulting and architecture firms to provide us with information. I think we have shared our own and acquired outside expertise. Have we done our due diligence? We have again asked for extra money from the townspeople to hire another architecture firm beyond our consultant to help us evaluate options and discuss possibilities. We've looked at the pieces of property and tested. We've done, I think, any reasonable amount of due diligence that can be done. And we'll continue that throughout whatever part of this process continues. Have we communicated with the taxpayers and in both directions and enough? I know some people will think we haven't or really honestly believe we haven't, but I think we have tried very hard. I think we have covered electronic media. I think we have covered mail to every house. I think we have done the way that old things used to be done before any of this electronic stuff. And we've posted our meetings on the bulletin board. So yes, I think we have communicated. Are we meeting the charge that we volunteered to lead as committee members? I even read through the charge again tonight before I came up here, and I believe we are following the charge. I realize that some people will not ever believe it or not be satisfied. And personally, I hate that this can't be corrected, but that's just not human nature. Some people will always have a different opinion and that doesn't make them wrong. But we're not going to get 100% agreement on any issue. We can't sit in the middle of the road. We need to move forward and provide the information that we were tasked to provide to the public and continue the process as we were charged. The last thing I want to say on this is that I hope the townspeople remember, because it concerns me from a lot of the comments we're getting, that we are not making a decision and we are not forcing the taxpayers to spend any money. We are making a recommendation on what we think would be the right option if the taxpayers choose to spend the money. The taxpayers still have the most valuable thing in a democracy, and that's their vote. The taxpayers will decide. We won't decide to spend or not spend this money. The taxpayers get to decide if we move forward. So our job is to follow our charge and make our recommendations and let the taxpayers decide and exercise their right and their privilege. That's chairman's report. I'll go on to approval.
Mike, you mind if I have a few words with everyone? Last Thursday was an interesting evening for me. Having not been a chairperson of any meeting of that magnitude for some years. I certainly got an earful of the townspeople's opinions. My concern about tonight is that we finally received complete feedback from the public just a few hours ago. I would not be comfortable voting any project forward tonight. I think we need another week so we can absorb what people have reached out to share with us. I have a lot of concerns about taxes, the impact of an increased mill rate, and most importantly, the impact of a much higher mill rate on our primary taxpayers, the big ticket taxpayers.
I will, just as a point of order, I think we're getting into the debate about the topics
Yes,
themselves.
okay.
So I think we should save that for those agenda items.
That's fine. I do want to touch on those topics. I did run through a review of our charge tonight. I had a PowerPoint presentation, but I didn't put it on my USB stick, so I don't have it here. And it was just probably what you did, run down each and every item on the charge and where we stand. And, you know, it's not too difficult to quickly run through that. There's some things that we have completed, and there's actually a lot of things we have not completed because there has been no referendum and there is no project yet. Correct. So yes, we have 11 primary items on our charge, but we can't get there until after this referendum. And we need, this committee will have to move a project, perhaps, and refer it to the board of selectmen, and where it goes from there will be determined by the referendum. But I would ask for another week before this committee is forced into, not forced into, but chooses which direction we're going to recommend to the board of selectmen.
All right, we can have that discussion when we get to those agenda items. I will also know, I got a communication from Scott Pellman, our consultant. He is stuck on the tarmac in an airplane right now. He has been stuck in various airports throughout the day today because of the weather in the middle of the country, and he can't join us at this point.
I don't know, quite honestly, Mike, whether we need him tonight.
Well, I'm just making a point that he's, not for people wondering where he is.
Okay. This is our meeting, really. This is the committee's meeting. It's going to be the committee's decision.
All right, let's move on to approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of the school building committee for January 18th, 2023.
I'll second them. Ann?
You're welcome.
Okay, any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes of the 18th?
Go ahead. Yes, so I heard Mr. Blessington's comments tonight about the concerns he expressed, and I see.
Point of order.
What, Catherine, go ahead.
Aren't we approving the meeting minutes? And
Yes.
is this about the meeting minutes?
Yes.
This is about the meeting minutes.
Okay, well, he said John Blessington, so I wasn't
Yes, it's
sure if you
about
were.
He's in the minutes.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
I
about
wasn't
this.
sure if you were talking about public to speak.
No.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
To that portion of the
Feel free to.
minutes that contain some aspects of his comments, and I'm just asking, can we simply attach what he submitted to us to our minutes? It seems fairly simple and straightforward.
I
I would think
believe
you
we.
want to welcome that.
Right, so we often have a lot of documentation that doesn't necessarily get attached to the minutes, but it doesn't mean we can't attach them to the minutes. I think that that's probably a good way to resolve it, is just to attach them to these minutes. And,
How do you change the minutes?
Don't. They go, any changes in the record of the current minutes, so.
right, so it's, so what we would end up doing is we would end up noting in this meeting that we have corrected the previous minutes by adding it here.
So in our
So we can attach to our current minutes.
Essentially, we'd attach it to our current minutes to correct the fact.
Well, that seems reasonable.
Yes.
Right.
The challenge with this process is the minutes get made, they have to get publicly posted. Once they're publicly posted, you're not really supposed to change them. You're supposed to refer to the changes in the next meeting. Which seems weird because what you really want is those minutes to
No,
be
I-
accurate.
Not everything
Right.
always happens in real time. I
Right.
understand that, but if it can be, any feedback we get from the public should be welcome, and then if we
Right.
can attach it to our meeting minutes of this evening, the public will have access to it, and I think it's a good remedy. So do I have to make a motion to do that?
Well, we're already in a motion right now,
Okay.
so I would not suggest another at the moment.
Friendly
And
amendment?
But, well, no, we're.
Yes, so Mike, wouldn't we approve the minutes as amended per what Peter's asking, is to just attach the comments from John?
Yes,
We'd approve the minutes based on the amendments, the friendly amendments that Peter is requesting.
it's not even a friendly amendment because it isn't an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
We will- Yes,
An edit to the minutes, but I think the important thing is that if we're gonna vote, we're gonna vote on the minutes plus what Peter is recommending.
yes, I agree with you. Yes. Gary?
Can I ask someone to confirm what the reason is that we would do this for one, for one person that speaks and not do this for everyone?
We're specifically requested.
Well, I guess in my mind, we're taking sort of a point of privilege here because Mr. Blessington felt that his remarks were intentionally being left out of the record or being quashed. And so my feeling is we're doing belts and suspenders here. It
Okay,
is not necessary. I agree. We're not including everybody's comments as attachments to all the minutes. We could easily just say what I said earlier, which was it's recorded in many places. But I think we're taking the extra step to assure Mr. Blessington that his accusation is unfounded.
okay. As long as that's noted in these minutes, I'm good with that. Thank you.
I'll try to find a way to boil that down. Other discussion?
Yeah, one comment, Mike. I noticed on some minutes for other boards or committees or commissions, it's noted that the minutes are not official until approved at a subsequent meeting. And maybe that's not a bad policy to follow, so that when you do finally approve the minutes, any adjustments would have been noted at that time and recorded in that meeting. I think that's a sensible policy to follow.
We can research a little with the town clerk and make sure we get that right before the next meeting.
That's the truth of everything. They're not official until they're approved.
Yeah, that's what I thought. The problem is there's also a rule that once you post it in the public, that version is supposed to stay out there also.
No, I'm not saying you retract anything.
Right.
All I'm saying is a little note at the bottom of
Simply make sure it's at the top like it is on most meetings.
Yeah, some meeting minutes do that. We haven't been.
Right.
I just think that's appropriate.
Peter, you had
Yeah, I just want to say, that I don't think this is unusual. I think we should encourage anyone to submit their remarks in writing, and then if we have that, it's great to add that to the record. Why wouldn't we do that in all cases? I think feedback from the public is a good thing, and I don't think it
Yes.
should be something that we occasionally do or make an exception for.
His feedback is documented in the minutes of the 18th, not exactly word for word, which is what he's asking for. He's asking for his text to be included, which we are going to do.
And everyone's remarks are documented word for word in every recording we have.
So if we receive correspondence, let's say someone sends us a letter, can we attach that to our minutes as just a standard procedure? Well, why would we not?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily do that because if you look at the amount of emails the committee chairperson gets, a lot of them are not even relevant to the
That's not the
minutes.
business of the meeting.
Right. You have to focus on the business of the meeting. And anyway, let's resolve this one. While we're on this one.
I will agree to disagree.
Well, we can't make a policy change in the middle of a motion to approve these minutes. Is there any more discussion on the motion to approve the minutes of the 18th with a note indicating that Mr. Blessington's remarks are included verbatim in this record? Any other questions? No, we're gonna, okay. Can Can I get all in favor, say aye, please?
Aye.
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 All right, we'll do a roll call then. Ann, are you ready to do the roll call?
Yes. Okay, Gary,
Aye.
let's see. I don't have a list in front of me. I'm sorry, but I'll go
Erica to
around
do
the
it.
screen. Catherine,
Yep,
From here.
aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Brianna,
Aye.
let's see. Is Justin here tonight? I don't-
Yes.
Okay, Justin,
Aye.
Ralph,
Aye.
Peter,
Nay.
is our new member here tonight?
James,
James?
Yeah.
he's abstaining.
Okay, am I forgetting anyone? I'm
Chris
sorry.
Pomona.
Oh, Christopher, of course.
Aye.
Okay. Is that everyone?
And your vote.
Your vote, Ann.
And,
Aye. Thank you. I will
okay, so
compile a list. Okay.
if I got that correctly, it's 8 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
Did you get that correct?
I did get that
Yeah,
correct?
yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. So motion passes. Thank
Mike,
you.
who was the abstention?
James?
James Marshall.
Okay, I didn't hear that. Thank you.
Okay,
Can I make a motion to approve the finance subcommittee minutes of 1/18/23?
you may.
I'll second.
Discussion on the minutes of the finance subcommittee of January 18th. Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any abstentions? James Marshall. All right, let's do a roll call.
Okay. Mike,
Yes.
Brianna,
Aye.
Justin,
Yes.
James, James,
Abstain.
Christine, Catherine,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes. Yes.
Have I forgotten anyone?
Yourself?
Anne, yes.
Okay, so I have 9 yes, 1 abstention, and no nays. Okay, motion carries. Thank you all. Okay, communications. I think we have a few things to talk about in here. This afternoon, I got the latest, the last couple of days of the emails into PDF and sent over to the members. So anything that went to the SBC inbox, you had up to a few days ago, and then the last, I'd say 3 days or so, I sent you this afternoon. We also have more we can talk about in community feedback when we get to that point. Do we have anything else in the communications in the subcommittee or anything else we want to talk about in communications itself?
No. Unless Phil has something.
Phil said no. Catherine, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. There were an awful lot of emails that were sent today, and some of them were very lengthy. Some of them were short and sweet. I'm just curious, how are we addressing or responding to some of their concerns? Are we going to be updating the FAQs, or is there?
Yes, so we'll continue to follow the same procedure we've been following, and that is if some things are very easily answered with a quick response and the information has already been out in the public, they may just get a direct answer to help answer question or solve the whatever quandary the person who wrote the email is in. Otherwise, we'll go through in more detail. Typically, Phil and I communicate. He'll say some are more in his wheelhouse, he'll respond, or we will update the FAQs, and we'll make sure I'm marking each email in the inbox when we've managed it so that we know that we're not missing anything. And a couple of them were long. Some of those long ones, a lot of those questions have already been answered and actually are in the FAQs.
Yeah.
So we'll attempt to we'll attempt to circle back around those more, but
Okay.
there wasn't time today to be able to respond in detail to those and get them to the committee members so they can see what the questions are.
Right, understood. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, you said you PDF those and sent those around?
Yep.
Could you add me to that list moving forward?
I did. I
I
did.
didn't get it, so.
Oh, I'm-
Check your spam.
Okay, I will make sure it gets forwarded to you because I did add you to the group.
Okay.
Did you get other emails today?
Not from you.
Was it the town email?
It was his town email. Yeah.
Are you getting your town emails yet?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try and send it now and think you get it.
Sometimes it's a filter, if it's seeing lots of people getting it, so.
Okay.
Might just have to be learned.
Yeah, because I was careful to make sure you were included in the
No, I
group this
appreciate it. Are
afternoon.
you
Yeah,
communicating, so?
yeah, I have been emailing you throughout the last week.
Yeah. So.
Proud of you.
I know they can get there from
The
Florida.
town.
Okay, anything else on communications? Just,
I just had a question. You said, did you send multiple emails today?
I sent one email today.
A bunch of attachments.
Yes, I'm sorry. I sent one email today with a bunch of PDFs attached to it. Yes, I'm sorry. When I said that to Jim, I was thinking the other emails I've been sending him over the last few days, he's been asking for information to get caught up on the process. So I've been emailing him stuff.
You know, if you got mine.
So Erica just forwarded it. Let us know if you got it. All right. Okay. And I'll check and make sure I'm not typing the address in wrong or something.
Yeah, I got that. So, all right, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, anything else in communications? All right. Old business, we're gonna hold off on this agenda item at this point. I don't know that Scott's gonna be able to join us at all. The last text he sent me was right before I came into the meeting and he said they were just closing the door on the plane, telling them they were gonna try again. So
Oh, boy.
I assume that doesn't make him available for a while, so.
Not if he's in the tube.
Yeah, I did ask him if he had anything that he had learned or developed over the last time period that would be of any value to the committee tonight, and he said, no, there was nothing new in what he was reporting that he thought was valuable for us for tonight. So let's move on to new business. 7A, community feedback. We have all of the surveys. I sent that out to you in raw data. We also have a summary that Phil and his staff put together of that. So why don't we look at the summary and then then start discussing all of this stuff.
You're on, letting people in, because I can't see now. So, this is summary of the community feedback that we received. And we started with a slide that was just attendance and presentations. I'm gonna make that bigger for you all on there. And so the first presentation that we did, and this is a combination of what we had online as well as in person. So we had approximately 55 people at Hall School, 12 at Center, 9 at the Public Library, 7 at the Senior Center, 22 at the TOB here, and 31 at Center School. And the only one of these that was online was Hall School. That was our first presentation. All of the other ones were just in person. And those totals don't include where we had, we were in attendance there. So that doesn't include that. Erica had a point, she had a lot of this data as well, that there were 6 known community members were at more than one event. So, when we saw the same faces popping up, realize that that same person might be in that count at Center, Public Library, Senior Center, and so forth. From the community feedback, community forum last week, the feedback themes, I tried to take notes on every single person and tried to do some themes. And so these were the comments that were made multiple times. And so, comments about expand the charge to consider a CIP only approach, more information. People wanted more information on what would be the result if there was a no vote. Questions about the water and road improvements, if that was in the cost of the new building. The impact on residents with lower fixed income. If there's a new school, what happens to the two buildings? What's the cost beyond the project? And it's come up again tonight, roads, firehouse, what's in CIP, what cost would be in center school or hall school? What was the length or life of a new building? What if it was renovated, what was that? What's the vision of the town regarding our buildings? There was several comments about the confusion on the tax impact on the postcard, and then comments in, both ways on the cost of the projects. So hopefully I captured something. I think it's, if there's something that you felt that was repeated that's not on there, I think that's fine to add it. This is just meant to be a snapshot. So this is the data. I coded every single person based upon their comments that night, and who was there. So there were about 65, that was our max participants online. We had approximately 50 people in the room and 36 people spoke. And so within those 36 people, there were 3 comments supporting renovating hall, alteration extension project, 12 that made comments supporting a new school, 20 that said don't do any of the projects, and 1 person had a comment only, didn't go either way. The number of speakers at the community forum who also completed a survey is on there. And so you can see, because what I was trying to do here in capturing the data was a combination of the surveys, because it's documented on paper or electronically, within the community forum because it was recorded, and also via our email where someone didn't complete a survey. So there's no duplication that we know of unless it was anonymous. And I'll talk about the number of anonymous things that we had here. So if there was a speaker at the community forum and they didn't identify, preferred option, I utilized the data from the survey. Does that make sense? And typically they were talking about the same concept, but didn't just come out and say, I support X or not. So here's this actual survey results. There were 195 surveys, but 2 were duplicates. I talked to the registrar of voters about this, and they said take the 2 most current from those people. So there were 193 surveys. There were 18 surveys in the town office building, 8 in the library, 1 in the senior center, and there were 166 surveys after that, after taking out the duplicates. So the first question that was on there, do you have all the information, or will you have all the information to form your opinion? It was 161 yeses and 32 no's. So overwhelming people, for the most part, felt that they had the information. I know this was a question at the community forum. What's to stop anybody from doing the survey over and over and over? You all saw that. If you see evidence of people repeating, I'd like you to point it out. I did not see that. We took out the duplicates. There were 18 anonymous surveys, 15 supported a new school, 3 supported a renovation, and 2 were just flat out no. So from the standpoint of surveys in there that we would take out, I think there was only 1 email that I noted that was inappropriate. You can pick it out when you go through the results yourself, but those results are still in there because they check boxes. So it's there. So the results here, I would support renovating Hall School. Yes, and please include an auditorium. There were 18 responses, which was 9%. Yes, no auditorium was 40 with 21%. And no, I would not support renovating HMS was 135 at 70%. The comment trends that were across numerous surveys, the disruptive process, and I think that was geared towards education, cost of the project. There were many comments that were on the nose that basically said, hey, just maintain and fix what you have, and do nothing and just maintain the 2 schools you have. There were a number of comments about concerns about hazardous materials while it was student staff occupied. And then support for it was around that HMS already, the infrastructure was already in place. So those were just the general comment trends. Again, if you want to add more, feel free to chime in.
Let me just interrupt you for just a second.
Yes.
Did you have a question of some clarity, or do you want to
Yes,
discuss
yes.
things, which I think discussion we should do at the end?
No, not discussion,
Okay.
just a question about the no response to HMS. I noticed there were a lot of no's to both. So
Good,
is
we're gonna
that-
get to it.
Is that? Can we somehow differentiate those?
You will see at the end, you'll see the no, and you'll also see that if there's a no for Hall School, you'll also see it in the new. But you'll see the double no at the very end.
We'll discuss that in detail a little bit later.
Yeah. So the new school, on a new site, yes, and please include the auditorium. There were 82, it was 42%. Yes, without the auditorium was 26 for 13%. Flat out no, 84 for 44%. And I was being as straightforward as I could. There was one paper survey that came back. This person said maybe yes. I didn't put it in the yes column. I made it its own. All right, so there's 1% there. The comments around this were around cost. Again, that could go either way. Maintain, again, 2 separate schools. There were concerns about the site and wanting to do a traffic study. There was concerns about empty buildings if you do a new site. There's comments about the new building being less disruptive for education and having a faster timeline. There was comments about having a community space, speaking about the auditorium and the ability for future expansion. When you get to the combined feedback, this is where I took the email, the SBC, the surveys, and the community forum. There is no duplication here. So if Phil Stevens sent an email supporting a project, and Phil Stevens also spoke at the community forum, and Phil Stevens also filled out a survey, that was taken into account one time. The only thing that I can't account for are those anonymous. I can't say if Phil Stevens did a survey and it would be an anonymous survey. Okay, so that's the only thing that I can't account for in this. So when you look at, I combine these two to support a project. So it's new or with an auditorium, HMS alteration extension with or without an auditorium, they're combined. So there was 58 out of 236 people that we got feedback from for 25%. And you can see all 3 speakers that were at the community forum also filled out a survey. So they come out of that, they come out of the survey number and their feedback matched. The support for a new school, again, with or without the auditorium, community forum, there were 6 people that did not complete a survey that we knew of. There were 6 additional people that did complete a survey. So they came out of that number. There were 108 in that survey, and there were 12 emails that we double checked across the spreadsheet that emailed support, and you received all of those emails now for a total of 126 out of 236 or 53%. The no-nos, none of the above. That was on both survey questions. The community forum, there were 13, and there were 7 additional that also completed the survey, so they came out of that number. And then there was 33 people that had the no on the survey, several that came in on the very last day, and they were included in these numbers. And then emailed support, do nothing, there were 6. So it was 52 out of 236 for 22%. So that was our kind of high level overview. You got all the comments, but the tallying of what boxes they checked, whether it was supporting a renovation project or new or no, and then just some general high level comment trends across the board.
But to note, Phil, we have copies of all of the actual
Yes,
surveys.
correct.
And we have.
All the paper surveys are
access to
coded,
all of the-
and Ralph had asked me if they had been added to the end. We were trying to sort them by timestamp for you. So as they came in, the electronic ones were timestamped, but for whatever reason, the TOB ones, we changed the coding several times to like TOB 1, TOB 2, and it would put them in order at the end. But you can see those are the only ones. I turned off the survey, the electronic survey, on Monday morning, and any paper copies that came in on Monday, we accepted. And those are what were entered throughout the day on Monday and into Tuesday, and that's what you received when you got the updated numbers. And all of those surveys are accounted for in this.
Yeah, the first version of the survey summary that I got had a couple of lines where there was nothing as far as what they checked or comments.
If
The
they
name
didn't
was-
check it, it's blank.
No, in the subsequent one, the later one that I got yesterday, those fields are filled in.
Is
But on
that,
the
was it
first
at the
version,
end? Was it the TOB one?
No, I'm talking about the electronic survey.
Oh. No,
That
those-
summary was blank for a lot of fields on the last couple. It was.
oh, no,
Oh, wait a
no,
minute,
you're
those
right.
are- Those are paper versions, I'm sorry.
That, which was correct. So just for clarity, I emailed Mike and said, here's the full thing. How do you want to send it out? Do you want to take out the email? And he said, here you go, committee, here they are.
So,
And I said, it's not complete because we were still entering the paper ones. So it was all on one, which is why we labeled them all. Library, one,
Right.
TOB, one, senior center, one. So you could see where that survey came from.
So I'm glad you brought up the question, because that is exactly when I phrased it in the email. This is the challenge with raw data. It's not filtered at all. It's not cleaned up at all. It's exactly the raw data. And Phil asked me that question, how do you want to handle the fact that it's raw? And some things may be outliers or misleading or need to be explained. And my answer was, I'm gonna send it to the committee. I'll take responsibility for that so that the committee knows they saw the raw data. And then this last version has those couple of, things, nothing altered, but it has that cleanup. on
And
that.
she entered it exactly as it was
Exactly,
written.
yeah.
No.
So
it
you
was
see
just-
spelling, you see punctuation, you see, it's exactly as they are. on
Yeah,
survey.
and some of the expletives too.
Yes. It is exactly how it was entered.
The last two lines of the first version were paper copies. Yeah. None of the fields have been filled in, but the names.
Correct, that's the
Right.
start.
Right.
That was the start of it. Yeah.
But that's been cleared up with the later version.
Mike
Right.
was excited and sent it off. Phil wasn't quite done asking the question.
Well, because of
There's
the
his due
time,
diligence.
because of the time crunch and
Just get you
because it was
going.
my chance to
Right.
get to email from being out of state, I wanted to get it out to you guys,
understand.
to the committee members as soon as possible. Okay. Phil, do you have any, would you do me a favor? Can you just go back to that last slide? I'm sorry, reshare that because I just wanted to look back at the third segment that you had there. I think that was the no-nos. I was spending time reading the upper section so much. Can you get to the end of the,
Yeah, this is the very last.
okay, the none of the above. I just want to go back to that again because I was spending too much time looking at the other two. Okay, so these are all people who said no to either project.
The bottom line is.
Right, the bottom group.
Mhm.
Yep, okay, that's what. Okay, thank you. Anybody else before this? Okay. All right, discussion.
Then what do you want to start? I can start.
Rip the Band-Aid off this thing, let's go.
Certainly I have an opinion. I have never been too shy about expressing it. It was interesting Thursday night about the concerns. And my concern when I run out a 20-year bond is where the mill rate winds up and the impact that's going to have on many taxpayers. One of the things that I started realizing is a 25% bump in mill rate is going to impact some major businesses big time. And I would be concerned if FedEx decided to move their hub somewhere else. They're a major taxpayer. Now, they move, that's a business decision on their part, I get it. But if their revenue isn't there, then everyone in town is gonna pay more. So, something to think about. And then there's the smaller businesses, perhaps like Brent's Motors. I don't know how they sit financially, but that's a tough business to actually make a good profit on. We could lose them. The other thing that concerns me about the impact on taxpayers are the 900 or so households in town that never see their tax bill because it goes to the mortgage holder. And they just merrily go along their way, paying their mortgage every month. And it may or may not be cognizant of the fact that rolled into that mortgage payment is their tax bill. And when taxes go up, the financial institution starts
Makes an
notifying
adjustment.
them.
Yeah.
You gotta pay more because your escrow's falling short. But what I see there, or what I suspect is there with a lot of particularly young or newer homeowners, is that they don't necessarily see the connection right away between the project that's being proposed in your town that's going to impact your taxes and the effect that will have down the road on your mortgage payment. So I don't know how well, I don't think we've communicated well on that topic at all. And then the other thing, the other takeaway that I had is I kept hearing this line, we need to build these schools so people will move here. People will want to move here. Well, if we build any one of these projects, our mill rate is going to far exceed our neighbor, Mansfield. Right now, Mansfield's at 30-something. I hold the 22-23 tax mill rates for all of the surrounding towns that OPM had. Wyndham is the top at 46-something. Mansfield's at 30.36, I think, off the top of my head. I could pull up the numbers and share my screen if y'all want to see it, but thinking that building a school is an attraction to move into a town. Oh, Willington's got a brand new school, but their tax rate's 40 mils or 45 mils. Why the hell would I want to go move there if I can go to Mansfield, pay 30, and they've got a brand new elementary school?
So how do we connect that to our
know.
to our charge? That's the question.
I don't know, Mike.
Because you're not the only one with those concerns.
Yeah,
So
sure.
how do we tie that to our charge? Because some of that argument is, do we do it or not do it? Which is not our charge, right? Like some of that's the taxpayers have to decide exactly that. I'm not cutting off your conversation. I'm just saying,
No, I
let's
understand.
connect that to our charge.
Well, how etched in stone is this charge?
Well, we have a charge in front of us right now. We're not debating changing our charge. We're debating the feedback from the community.
Understood. Okay, all right, so you want to narrow it down to that, that's fine. But those are the concerns that came out of this for me.
Very true.
And I really want to take time and go through all the comments.
Those
There's
concerns
some
are
good
echoed.
feedback in there.
Those concerns are echoed through all forms of communication that we've had, right? The public feedbacks are, if I recall.
But there may be some suggestions, there may be some ideas that I haven't stumbled across yet in those emails and in those survey, the raw data. I want to read all those comments, and I've gotten partway through it, but I'm not completely through it. And if we were to vote on something tonight, I would either would not vote or would vote no. It's that simple.
Do you have
my
other?
comments for now?
Okay. And
Ralph, I would be interested in those mill rates for neighboring towns, maybe Mansfield, Holland.
you have it handy?
We have it here in the.
If I can share.
We can share.
Be allowed to share my screen. You'd like to know Ashford's down to 32%.
And Willington also, yep.
Well, did you see that?
It's coming.
Okay.
This is sorted by mill rate. You want to see it in a chart form, I could display that as well.
30.38. And then Holland, let's see. Holland,
6.58.
36.58. I don't know that Mansfield is seeing the impact of their building yet. I'm not quite sure when that will affect their mill rate. Okay, thank you, Ralph. That's really interesting.
That's of June.
Yeah, that may not have.
They want
have
at
hit.
least July 1 data. If you, if,
But that, I mean, you can pick Mansfield, you can pick any other town that surrounds us. And by the time 4 years after we start, it's going to, can you see it okay, Mike, or you want me to blow it up?
Yeah, I can see it. I got my squint exactly right.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, this is in chart form. So
Ralph,
we-
can
we-
you email that to us?
Right here is where we fall.
Ralph,
we're
can
in-
you email this to us?
I certainly could.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that, Ralph.
No, you're welcome.
All right, other committee member comments? Jay?
I know one of the things I'm grappling with, given the decision at hand here is about the auditorium. You know, because we haven't gotten a lot of, or I haven't heard a lot of, even at the presentation last week, a lot of strong one way or the other. I was surprised in reading all of the survey comments yesterday, how significant, you know, the yes with auditorium for both options was, and I think it proves that, so thank you for crunching those numbers, Bill. You know, I found it interesting, because it was the first real look, you know, or first real insight I feel I've seen from a larger group than a few people showing up at the meeting, you know, as to how they felt on that. It's still something to grapple with for sure, but I was interested by it.
Yeah, I think the auditorium is a very interesting question, and a lot of people have asked from the community, even in the emails, about the variations in the numbers. It's one of the things that's made it more confusing for the public, because the auditorium not only is essentially roughly a $6 million add to the project, but then it has these trickle-down effects from adding it, because then the state changes the funding formula. State pays for half of the auditorium, but penalizes you on square footage. So now you end up actually going essentially backwards. And even though the state is funding on paper half of the auditorium, the penalty negates that. And so you actually end up, the taxpayers completely paying for the auditorium, or maybe even slightly more, depending on which project it is, because of the penalty and the extra square footage. So I think the auditorium is quite a challenge. That question is quite a challenge.
We need that guy to fix that for us. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, Deb, I had to mention your name.
Well, and it seems, looking at what other school projects have had attention legislatively, at least the ones I've been able to find, not comprehensive search, but the most of the legislative support that's helped either get a higher percentage or other ways to infuse some funding in, you know, whether it's a bonding issue or whatever. Most of those I haven't seen any that were about the auditorium anyway, at least not specifically noted as being about the auditorium. They've been about space waivers. It's been about getting the percentage of reimbursement increased, sometimes because of some particular issue. Obviously, we have the unique situation in Tolland where the percentage from the state was very high, but that was a very unique situation. We shouldn't expect that to happen here.
No, the one thing that helped them was the foundation.
Sure, there was a whole different ball of wax, right? But I think I have not anyway, in not exhaustive research, I have not been able to find anywhere where someone got a waiver for the auditorium. And the feedback from OSCGR has been pretty consistent, that don't bother asking for more than half of the auditorium, because it's, to the state, it doesn't have as much value for educational space as other educational spaces do.
Well, I think they're looking at it, how does it serve the education community in that building, not how it may help to serve the community.
Correct. Right, because that's not the state's job in this reimbursement program.
That's
right.
not their
That's
job.
the school's job.
And it's not the school's job either, right, of course, no. Other Other members, comments, thoughts on all the feedback?
One thing that I would add that hasn't been considered in the AE for Hall is available swing space in Mansfield when the Goodwin School is vacant in April. And if the referendum fails, then that's something I think that should be put on our agenda to at least do a walkthrough and see if it's viable for a couple of years to house our Hall Memorial students. That would compress the schedule. It would remove the escalation of about $750,000. It should lower the contingencies because total is usually based on total dollar amount. And it might make Hall a little bit more attractive financially. And there's no disruption other than the students are going to a building they're not familiar with for 2 years.
Phil, I don't know if you have anything you can contribute from the superintendent's point of view on having the kids going to a school like Goodwin, like the transport out of town. I think you had actually I feel like you had said something before that you've had conversations about this or looked into this maybe.
It's distance. I mean, a lot of it is distance, but I don't know if the Board of Ed decision or if the state allows it. I'd have to look because do you become a resident of do you become a Mansfield? I don't know. I'm not sure how it would work.
Does that create a bargaining unit issue too with teachers working in Mansfield and Mansfield's teachers having a different?
Students to Yale Smith.
But that's a regional school
right,
district.
We have an agreement.
It's a different school.
And I don't know that I want to get too far
It's
off
our high
topic
school.
on that, but programmatically, elementary school, we were talking about middle
It is
school
an elementary
kids.
school.
So programmatically, would it have
The right features.
right, enough of the needs? I want to be sure that that were addressed, as I'm sure our teachers would. I think about science labs, et cetera, at the middle school level is very different than a kindergarten or a first grader.
No, understood. I understand. It's a different grade spread in that
Yeah.
building, but it is a building that's going to be vacant. And if we were to vacate all of the contents would have to go. So we just move it all good. Now, whether or not the physical plant will match, we won't know until we do a walkthrough.
Right, well, and I know currently Mansfield is undergoing a
They have no plans for it yet.
study on those.
Their school building committee.
Peter, I feel like you were about to say something.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. What is the agenda item here? Are we discussing the community
feedback.
community feedback? Okay.
Yes.
Then I think we need to stick to that, because I didn't hear a lot of community feedback about, swing space in another municipality.
Your point of order is upheld. Back to community feedback.
You're right, Mike. I would like to express my thoughts about community feedback. I found the forum very useful. And I really appreciated the fact that everyone was able to speak. In fact, I felt Rob was quite generous in some of the time he allotted to individual speakers. It was a long evening. I saw people were uncomfortable on the wooden bleachers, but it was really good to hear everyone. And I took all of that in. And my sense is that, because I've gotten a lot of feedback elsewhere at the transfer station in particular, because that's where you see everybody. But there and email communications and just general feedback from family and friends. The first thing I would say is that I disagree with a comment that was made earlier that there are always naysayers and they should be ignored. I think there's a commonality in all of the views expressed, both pro and con, for the school solution. I think everyone genuinely wants that. And I felt that spirit at the Hall School Forum. I feel it here in this committee. No question, as Ralph and others have already articulated, that cost became a big concern as the community started to recognize this issue. And I know that's frustrating for us because we've been working on it for 2 years and they're just entering the process. But that's how it works. They're the public, and you know they have the right to enter the process when they do. And as I just said, the cost was a big concern, and I was surprised how intuitive people are about this, because I think our presentation of the cost has been very confusing, not intentionally, but because of all the choices. Multiple options for 2 different projects with waivers, without waivers, auditoriums, different levels of construction in hall, etc. And nevertheless, people seem to understand that, you know, in year 6 of this bond, their taxes are going up 60%. And then they kind of figured out over the period of the bond, another 40%, essentially at the end of the 20-year period. In most cases, when I ran out Phil's numbers, thank you, Phil, it's a 90 to 100% increase in taxes. And that's significant, but nor is this building committee the Board of Finance. So, as Mike just said, how do you tie the 2 together? And I thought about that, and I thought again about how intuitive our townspeople are, because they weren't just saying, "Oh, I don't want to pay anything," or that we don't want anything. I didn't hear a lot of people say do nothing. I didn't hear that. I don't hear that in general. What I did hear was really good comments about timing, for example, of the project. Does this make sense at this point in time? We're still paying the bond for the library. I heard talk about social contract in the forum, and we've always had that kind of understanding in town that we take on a big project, a fire truck, for example, we pay for it, and then we move on to the next thing. I sensed people were frustrated that there was no recognition of the timing issue of this. Scale of the project seemed to be something that people were looking at and trying to understand. I could see it in the feedback we were getting. And that's something, timing and scale of the project, that's important to this committee. That's something we need to talk about. And I think they sensed that somehow the project got away from us. And I say that because for the longest period of time, we were looking at this project in the context of where we started with the Fryer matrix of all the options we could do. Renovating schools, closing one, opening one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A number of people made comments like, why don't we have these options? They didn't know we looked at those options, obviously. And they were wanting us to have a town meeting to give us a new charge. Nothing is preventing us from doing that now. We went through that process, but again, I think that people recognized when we started that process, and this predates Phil even, this was Dr. Jacoby was superintendent at that time, and the consultants were brought on board. The understanding was that we were going to work within the framework of the state reimbursement based on the enrollment defined by our enrollment consultant. And I recall Phil for the longest period of time emphasizing that we have to stay in that construct. Scott, our consultant, saying we have to stay in that framework because reimbursement is essential to the success of the project. People kind of expect that we're going to get, I hope you're listening, Jeff, funding from the state, and we want to maximize that opportunity. That changed. There was a major change in our process relatively recently. when we got the final ed specs, which took a long period of time, the Board of Ed worked on that very diligently. The ed specs put us into a larger building than our enrollment or the state reimbursement formula allows. That changed everything, and the scope that I think the scale of the project that people were grappling with in the auditorium, in the school or the gym, that it grew, and it grew beyond what we would be reimbursed for. Hence, it ties back to the cost. We're now looking at a much larger cost because of a lower reimbursement. We never discussed that as a committee. We never said, why do the ed specs define this size building that exceeds the enrollment the state says allows us to have for a building? And I think that was troubling to people, especially because.
Excuse me, can you say that line again? I want to make sure I heard you right. Just say what you just said.
I think it was troubling to people that we expanded the scale of the project beyond what the state and our enrollment defines for us.
Right.
They're saying we can have a 60,000 square foot building. We're now looking at, I think, 85,000 square foot building.
But didn't you right before that say we didn't explain why that?
Correct. We never discussed
Okay, we
that.
have discussed that multiple times.
Well, I respectfully disagree, Mike.
Well, it's in the record. So,
well,
I'm sorry, continue.
That all of this becomes more complicated when people were looking at different options and their perception that because people like to choose, we all take choice. They didn't understand that there was no choice, that the committee would decide on a final project. And somehow that input, for example, there were a lot of people at the meeting that spoke from both groups of pro and con, were uncomfortable with the single building model. And again, we defined the single building model in the very beginning as a cost savings measure. So we were thinking about cost back then. We were going from 2 schools to 1, yet there were a lot of people in the gym that were uncomfortable with having a single KA. And our whole premise of a savings by going from 2 schools to 1 goes away because we're now expanding that building beyond what the state will reimburse us for. So I think people were figuring this out in bits and pieces, and I think they were troubled by it. And then there are other interesting issues that were raised, like the infrastructure costs someone just mentioned. Are those included? Are those not included? And I thought the most important comment all groups made was, and it was expressed again tonight from someone in the audience that spoke, how does this all fit into the general context of what the town is doing in terms of emergency services, social services, school funding for its regular budget? There was no sense that we ever discussed any of this with the Board of Finance, with the Board of Selectmen. And now we're saying the process is such that we're going to allow 1 meeting for the Board of Finance to consider everything that is a financial impact of this project on the town, which doesn't seem reasonable to people. And I think we saw that. So I think there are a lot of things that tie back to our charge on how this project is constructed, how it started, and then what it became, and how the costs changed rather dramatically. And I think people were saying to us in the gym, we're looking for you to find a creative solution. And the sense was, well, you get what you get. And the committee will decide, and we'll move to referendum. And yes, the people will decide, but I would rather give them a better solution. Right now, we have a high-cost project, 2 high-cost projects to select from. It doesn't seem to serve the interests of our community. It could potentially be devastating financially to a lot of people in our community. And I think this is a good time for us to pause change our calendar, get off this freight train that's accelerating to where we don't want to go, and bring both groups together and find a better solution, especially now that we're getting good feedback from the community. Thank you.
Mike, can I speak to the size of the building?
Gary has his hand up.
Just hang on, Catherine. I'm trying to do it here. Can you just
stop talking in the audience, please? Thank you.
Could you make a note and hold it for a minute? Because we've had some people who've been waiting a long
Okay,
time to
that's fine,
speak.
that's fine.
Gary?
Thank you. Just real briefly, I'm a little troubled to hear, it described as kind of both groups. I don't think there are two groups here in any way at all. I think that people have their own opinions. There's a wide variety of opinions. So I really don't want us to get into like, it's one group against another group. And I don't feel that way at the forum. I don't feel that way now. So I just want to be careful of that. I was actually sitting next to Peter at the forum. I honestly, Peter, didn't hear a lot of I heard definitely some of what you had described. I didn't hear anybody talking about ed specs really. I didn't hear that brought up as a concern. What I did hear and what we must have heard the same thing on was people's concern of the cost for sure. And we've talked about that for a long time. This is an expensive project. There's nobody on this committee and nobody that we've spoken with that said, hey, this is no big deal. I mean, we're well aware of that. We heard that from the community the other day. I heard loud and clear from people that people are concerned with the cost of it. And so I'm definitely going to take that into consideration when I vote on this, whenever that is. I hope it's this evening. But certainly the most cost-effective choice is certainly gone to the top of my mind. And that's because of the feedback that we heard from the community. And honestly did make me think a lot about it. So just want to mention that. Thank you.
Ralph, did you have a comment on something that?
Well, I
Pete
did
said?
want to, we did discuss how the ed spec pushed the size of the building beyond what the blanket square footage dictated by the state guidelines, which was simply by number of students. And then when Scott and Phil got into the details of how to pull together an ed spec that matches our programs, things got inflated. And Phil's staring at me, and hopefully I'm not saying anything contrary to what you've expressed to us over the course of this committee. That Scott has said to us about how we just can't do it in 50 some odd thousand square feet. So if you're going to reduce the size of the building, then quite honestly, I suspect what's going to happen is the ed spec's going to have to shrink a little bit as far as programming. And if that's what the Board of Ed can accept, then maybe we can cut back some. I don't know. This is a little bit beyond my wheelhouse here.
Hang on, I got Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say regarding the surveys and all the comments we received, I was quite impressed at how many people actually came out to all the, the community events that Phil did at the schools and the senior center. Just getting up to speak takes a lot of courage. And, I was really impressed with that. And I think it's great that people are sharing their thoughts on either pros or cons of either option and really giving thoughtful feedback about how it's going to impact the community and also thinking outside the box about how is it going to affect, businesses and the future down the road. And I do want to say I was also impressed with a 7th grader actually speaking up in our last community meeting. I mean, again, that takes a lot of courage. And I thought that was really positive. And then just everybody else that was supporting it from a positive approach as to supporting a new school. and also just again, coming out to speak their mind and share with us their concerns about what is going to happen. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
I'll pass. I don't want to get too far out of the weeds on community feedback.
Okay, Brianna?
Same.
You pulled your hand down? Okay.
I just, I guess,
Go
I
ahead,
have a
Justin.
question or so what you said about the ed specs there, Peter. I thought both in the very beginning or at some point in time, Dr. Prouda, when we did that report, and I think Scott even said that there wasn't a way that we were gonna get down to the state requirement numbers. Not saying that the size of the school and what we're trying to do couldn't be smaller, but I don't think we're ever gonna get to the state number for square footage.
Wholeheartedly. No, I mean, the problem with that, I mean, and looking at the ed spec, I know there is certain program you need for a 2 or 3 classroom, 2 tracks per grade school. There is, yes, you can potentially reduce things and that will develop as a part of any new school design. I mean, we're very early in what the actual program is going to be. You're like, you're less than 5% of the way through with design, just on where, QA&M has gotten to in an early concept study. There's a lot of refinement for any option that is chosen, that will happen along the lines, but there isn't, when you start looking at projections, every school needs certain core program, and that ed spec does capture. There are ways for efficiency, but when you start to try to reduce to the level that the state would allow this in that enrollment, you're cutting critical program, you're cutting core education. It's just the nature of the way that is done. Unfortunately, it favors large school districts, and I know Scott's talked about it at like numerous times. Which is why I think they're recognized and why the waiver is being considered and all that, stuff. So just, it's, I don't know where I'm going with this, other than say that there really isn't too much. There will be opportunity for efficiency as this develops, I suspect. And, that'll be the job of the designer in conjunction with the Board of Ed and I'll stop.
I think one of the things that matters for the public and for us in our deliberations is that the comment that Scott's made a few times is the state's formula just doesn't work in a school district this small. And that's a hard thing for us to grasp. It's hard for the public to grasp because the formula is there and that's where we get a bunch of the funding from. And, the public has said in many comments, that, look, the square footage of the school is too big because it doesn't match the formula and now we're getting penalized. And you can understand why the public's looking at it saying, why am I going to pay even more in my taxes? Why are we talking about a project that has a penalty in it that's going to make it cost even more to me? And I think that's a challenge, and that's where we will, if this goes forward, we will have to work to try to get some support, whether it's through the waiver or whether it's through our legislative helpers, in trying to get the formula to be a little more favorable for us. And some of the very simple things, even QA&M talked about it in their presentation also, is that if you have a corridor with 4 classrooms on it, that corridor is a certain minimum amount of width, and so a certain minimum amount of cost. If that corridor has 6 classrooms on it, or even if it has the same 4 classrooms, but has maybe 50 or 100 less kids, whatever the number is, the corridor still costs the same to make. It's still the same square footage, even though you have less kids, and the formula is based on the amount of kids. So when you do the formula, it says this is the dollars per kid you get, but that doesn't match square footage per kid. So I think that's a very challenging thing because we essentially get penalized for being a small school. And that's hard for us as a committee. That's hard for the taxpayers to wrap their minds around or want to support that, I think.
Can I follow up on that? So in the prior study that was done in 2017, one of the things that came out of that is that we would be penalized if we just were renovating Hall School, keeping it exactly as it was as a middle school. We would be penalized in our reimbursement because it's larger than the square footage for the number of students.
Right.
So right off the bat, if we didn't change the size of that building, we would still be penalized. So even though programmatically might be what we need, it was too much for the number of students we currently have. And if this is too much in the weeds, please tell me and I'll ask, maybe even offline to Jim and take advantage of your expertise. We have a set of ed specs that have come from the Board of Ed, and I know they put a lot of work in, and it seems to some that it took a long time, but it's a lot of work. In your professional capacity, have you ever seen a project go through where the ed specs didn't go through multiple changes?
So the ed spec is a design, what we'll say is the design target. I think it's easiest to phrase that way. As you work through the intricacies of the design and try to integrate the adjacencies between program elements, accommodating access, to various areas of the building, separation, security. Those targets will be refined, particularly in a renovation. Sometimes like in QA&M's plans, for example, showed that, the existing space isn't necessarily perfectly suited for the exact size of the ed spec without either significant change or increased area, which I think was prevalent in some of those. So, there's more advantage, there's more opportunity to capitalize on efficiency with a clean, new, site, pristine site, new construction in general, or a new addition to a building. You're going to have more efficiency in that addition than you want a renovation.
I just know in some of my research, I saw multiple versions of ed specs as the project went on, and thought that as you work through the design process,
You're going to
some
get
of those things change.
feedback along the way at each stage of the design. That is, this committee will have feedback, the Board of Ed will have feedback at every stage. And with the suggestions of the design professionals, they'll, there may be recommendations that will inform the ed spec. The budget comes into play too. If you wind up being over budget. Sometimes you sure things down a little bit. And you
Oh, the
really have to make
CGR
that-
reasons. Yeah.
So.
I had a couple of hands on the screen. I'm not seeing them now. You guys. Go ahead, Ann.
Mike, I just wanted to really emphasize that waiver. Even though we won't know about it until after we submit for our grant application, that is a potential savings. And
Yes.
I think the state understands that you need a lot more space to educate pre-K through 8th grade students than you do for an elementary school or a middle school separately. So I think we have a little hope in that.
Thank you. Was there another hand on the screen I saw there?
Yes, I was just gonna say, there is no fat on those ed specs. It's actually, what's on there is what's built to maintain the programming we have now. And frankly, maintain isn't good enough for me. So I would actually like to see some things added in for our students because they deserve it. So there's nothing to cut off those ed specs, period.
Thank you. All right, more comments on public input? Here.
I just want to respond first to what Gary said about ed specs. I didn't mean to infer that the public understood the ed spec process. But I think they sensed the scope of our project increased dramatically. A number of people said that somehow this seemed suddenly out of control. And I think that is within our charge. And from the very beginning, it seemed difficult. I remember doing the tours of both buildings and the abundance of space. I recognize, as Phil says, there's often space in the wrong places, but it was difficult to go from 2 schools to 1 and have the amount of space that we didn't know then because we didn't have the ed specs, but we kind of sensed that there would be a reduction. And now we know that we need, as Brianna just very well put it, need even more space if that's the case, if there are major financial penalties by the state that we could incur, and I'm hopeful as Ann is, but somehow it doesn't pass the reasonable person standard to me to say, okay, we passed this in referendum and the state's gonna say, well, we'll give you a waiver. Seems more likely that they'll make those funds available to someone else because our project has passed. So I sensed a lot of frustration with that at the forum. But with all of these obstacles and our original premise of going from 2 schools to 1, which in the Fryer report said worked in comparison to the other options because we were building a school with full reimbursement. If those things are all no longer true, if we even need more, as Brianna says, then I think we have to re-examine our assumptions. Some of that was said at the forum. People are very intuitive. They said, maybe we should have 2 schools. Maybe that's a better option. We didn't know that then. Catherine, this is one reason I was trying to get back to the Fryer report on the agenda unsuccessfully, because we're always so busy, we always run out of time, I understand that. But I think we need to re-examine all the options in the context of the space and the cost that we now have. And I think the not knowing what the aspects were, Gary, I think the public knew that. And I don't think there are 2 sides. Everyone was saying, figure out a way to do this better. And I'm not sure the 2 options we're now presenting are the best solutions because we're not getting to where we need with space or cost.
Catherine?
So yeah, I think regarding the ed specs, to Peter's point, I think it would be worth making a clarification to the public that, you know, if you think about it this way, I know Peter was saying that there was a baseline of what the state is going to allow. It's around 60,000 square feet. And then Peter was saying that he was hearing from people saying, and then all of a sudden it jumped to, I think it's 83,000 roughly. But in reality, if you look at it this way, center school square foot for ed specs is, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but maybe Phil, you can help me out here. It's 1 quantity. And then Hall has its own ed spec currently with their square foot quantity. And if you add those 2 together, which is essentially what we're doing in a combined school, if you add those 2 together, the existing square foot quantity for the ed specs for the 2 separate schools combined exceeds, it's in the 90,000.
91,417.
What is it?
91,417. Sorry.
Okay. So it actually exceeds what the what the Board of Education came up with the current combined ed spec. So I just wanted to put that in perspective because I think there's maybe a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of the fact that you know, oh, we increased the ed specs. We never increased the ed specs. We came up with ed specs that meet the current program, and like Brianna said, there's no fat in that. It's basically combining the 2 schools to come up with 1 quantity, 1 ed spec. The other thing is, you know, the current calculation that the state has for ed spec reimbursement is flawed. It's broken. And that's where we have to come in. We got to lean on our senator, and thank you for coming to the meeting tonight and offering your help, because I'm sure we'll take you up on it. But yeah, that's where we have to go back to the state and say, look, your formula is flawed. And we have to try to put our best foot forward as a committee to get the maximum reimbursement from the state, which will essentially reduce the town's tax burden. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Catherine. Ann?
I have 2 things to say. First of all, related to the ed specs, a lot of that extra space is over at Hall. And that's kind of, you know, different kind of spaces, because at the at center school, we are going to have fewer.
Yes, we're picking you up on the recording.
Pardon me? Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. We're going to have fewer classrooms for our elementary students than we do now. We have some bubbles with 3 instead of 2, and right now we only have 2 for each class. So even though it seems bigger, it really isn't. It's, as Brianna said, we're short of space. My second suggestion is, Peter, I think you have some good ideas, but perhaps we could move ahead with our charge tonight and take our vote. And if it goes to referendum and gets voted down, then we can all go back to the table and really dig into, you know, some of the ideas that Peter's presenting.
Catherine? You're muted.
Sorry, I just want to echo what Ann was suggesting to perhaps move on, but I do want to say about the community feedback. Your community feedback doesn't end after tonight. Whatever the decision is moving forward, we're still going to want that community feedback. Because I do know what I also heard from the feedback in the emails and the presentations and the surveys and all the forums that we had. People were concerned about separating the younger kids from the older kids. And that all comes with operational and design progress, and that's going to happen after a project is selected. So your input about that will get implemented into whatever project moves forward. Thank you.
Any more committee on the community feedback?
Sure. Well, I hope it's related to community feedback. It's my concern about, we're asking the public to accept the project as we've outlined it here, whatever project gets chosen. And yes, there are refinements that may be able to be made down the road. But in essence, we're committing to a dollar figure in the public's eyes by making a choice. I don't know where that's going to go over time, but something that Ann said troubled me a little bit by saying Paul contributed to the ed spec space, and that's not quite true. The ed spec fitting it into Hall contributed to excess area above and beyond the 83,000 in the ed spec. Just, and I know Jim can confirm this, just by you're trying to fit spaces into a building that you can't modify much. Exterior walls are where they are. You can't change them. So consequently, the total square footage of the hall options would have exceeded the ed spec. But it's not that the ed spec drove it to that. It's the fact we're dealing with an existing building that drove it to that.
Right. It was applying the ed spec to that building.
Correct.
Yep. Yes, I agree. Yeah. Any more discussion on community feedback? All right, I have a couple comments.
I just have a process question. So I think it's important that we put out some sort of snapshot about the data collection. I'm going to point to you and say, if you tell me to put that on the website, we'll put it up on the website. If
the
summary, if you want to allow people to process it, I can email it. And if they feel like they missed something in the comments that you want to add in that I've missed and the themes, we could do that. I'm asking, I think that's something important that we should be putting out there to people.
Is everyone okay with that presentation going out online, just by consensus here?
Yes.
It's already there in the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the meeting, it's presented in the meeting.
Very valid
Yeah.
point.
Having it on the website.
We need to, does the committee see any adjustments made to it before
That's
we
mine.
put out a final version?
I think we should put out what was presented since it was presented. I don't think there's not much in there there's nothing in there that's like judgments or controversial. It's reporting the
Data.
numbers.
Yeah, the subjective stuff comes from reading all the comments, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't see that as a big deal to, well, we've seen it tonight, anybody can go
Right.
to the video.
It was,
So-
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Have we covered community feedback? Well, all right, I'll make a couple comments. this has been great discussion, and pretty much everything I had to talk about has been covered by somebody already. I like what Gary said about there not being sort of an us and them in this. There are definitely people who are on one side or another of the question of doing it or not doing it. That's clear. I think that pretty much every single person involved, except maybe an outlier or two, feels like, wow, it's expensive. Even the people who are absolutely gung-ho about doing it. It seemed that our responses were indicating yes or no, it's too expensive. And then there were a few people that were like, no, we just don't need it anyway. But it was interesting to me to see the community feedback, to see the comments, and to see, there were actually more yeses than I thought there were gonna be. I did want to clarify one thing that you said before, Peter, about the naysayers. My comment wasn't that there were naysayers. My comment was that there were outliers, that we weren't always going to be able to, in any thought process, in any debate, in any decision, especially this big, there are going to be some people who are on the far end of the yes or no scale, or one option or another. And some people, we're just not going to be able to bring them all into the middle. It's not that they were disposable or I was disregarding them. I was just saying my goal would have been, in my comments here, was that in my heart, I would want us to all be together. And I just know it's not realistic to get us all, the whole town, to agree on one thing. It wasn't that the naysayers were not important.
Well, Mike, as
That was my comment.
as I said to you in an email to you, we have to bring both sides closer together. We're not going to get them all in the middle on the same page. It's just not going to happen.
Okay. Those are my comments on community feedback. I think the committee members have done a great job of capturing this. Anything else in community feedback?
Can I just add, like, very simple, to every resident who spoke to a committee member, attended a presentation, rewatched a presentation, talked to someone at the transfer station, came in here, that they were heard. I don't think there was a single person that wasn't heard. I know I haven't, I'm sure if everyone here hasn't already, we'll read every single comment from the written survey. Town office staff and myself listened to many a taxpayer. It happens to be tax season, so we saw a lot of people. I just want people to know, regardless of where you stood on the issue, where you stand on the issue, that your voice is heard. And this committee has, tough work to bring something to you to vote, but that your voice always matters. And I want to continue to encourage people to be able to comfortably have their say in public. I think if we get nothing from that, they should be able to come out and say, yes, I support something. No, I don't support something. I support, choice X. And that we hear them and accept their response in weighing our decisions, and just continue to encourage people to be part of the process.
Yeah, I'll add one comment on that about the value of the public comment. Unfortunately, most people publicly know that I was away on vacation last week. And I say unfortunately because I don't usually like to let people.
The room got muted. We lost the audio, guys.
Sorry, is it back?
We're good, thanks.
Okay, so anyway, so I was saying, most people know I was on vacation last week. And one of the things that I promised my family was that I would minimize interruption in our vacation we've been planning for the last 5 years with stuff here. But the fact of the matter is that I made a commitment to be here, and this is so important that there were times when It's another thing I don't like to share in public, but I can't ride roller coasters. And there were times when my family was on a roller coaster and I was sitting there on my phone, reading emails and communicating with Phil, communicating with Ralph. And the only reason I'm bringing up all this personal anecdotal information is because it does matter. And I want to assure the community that their feedback is being processed. There is no way we're going to be able to do something that agrees with everybody because we have people in various different camps, but all the information matters. And that's what I'll say about community feedback. Anybody else?
Well, yes, I want to respectfully disagree that we're taking this feedback as seriously as we could be, because we are just receiving all the feedback now. And I would think the public's expectation would be is that we have an opportunity to look at that feedback. I'm still going through all the stuff you sent, Mike, from a week ago. I'm just like you, I'm struggling to get through work and life. And because we're now on this fast track, because attorneys, bond financial people are determining our schedule, everything has to move now. So it feels very much like the public input doesn't matter. What does matter is what the bond council says, or what deadlines there are for OCGR. And that was some of the frustration I was feeling throughout the community, that we can't just do the project in a way where we think about this more deliberately. We have to do this because we're rushing for that June deadline when the state hands out their funds, and that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be a successful project, as Ralph said, brings everybody together. And I certainly don't feel that's happening right now when I'm looking at feedback that I haven't read yet, when I'm still working through the concept plans that we only got 2 weeks ago. It doesn't feel like we're doing that. It doesn't feel like when the townspeople were saying we need to find a better solution, that we're doing that. We're marching to the drums of attorneys and financiers, and I think that's wrong.
Mike, can I speak a little bit to that?
Yes.
This committee set a schedule with our owner's project manager. I took the information from this committee and that outline and outlined the process. I then took the decision date made by this committee for February 1st vote, and this committee for when they would like to see a possible referendum, and then worked with those that need to be involved to make sure we had all the steps that fit within that time frame. I just want to be perfectly clear that the time frame that was outlined began with this committee. And as we get closer to the finish line is when I get a little bit frustrated hearing members of this committee just now saying we should stop this process. So nobody is dictating our process but us. This committee had a February 1st timeline. This committee talked about a referendum timeline to suggest, and we completed a draft outline of steps to fit within that process. So no one is dictating that process, but the town, and those will happen at town meetings. But the core timeframe started from the SBC and our outline, which we first saw in February.
So I think I'll just make a point of clarification on that. It isn't, I don't think it's actually true to the point where this committee like made a motion and said this would be the timeline we were going to be on. But through working with the consultant, we came to a point where it was either going to be this timeline or a year from now. So that is really, when it comes to timeline, that's the decision. It's either now or a year from now, because we only get once a year to apply. And so a certain amount of things, the study from Peter Prouda has to be within a certain age. There are a bunch of things that have to be done in a certain timeline. So we can bump the whole thing out a year. We can't bump it out 2 months. We could bump out 2 months and then drag along, but we can't complete it until the next year because it's June or next June or the next June. So the timeline has somewhat by osmosis and somewhat by consensus come to where we are. Catherine?
Yeah, I was just gonna make not so much a clarification, but just a point of information is that it actually, in their original proposal on the timeline, it actually was much sooner. And we as a committee, by consensus, like you said, Mike, we actually did push it out. So just a point I wanted to make. I mean, if you guys want to verify what I just said, we'll have to look back at the timelines, but that is what happened. We actually did push it out because we didn't feel we were ready yet. So this is the extended time frame that we're on, this timeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Brianna?
Hi. We have a lot of people worried about the cost of all these things, and if we go ahead and push this out a year, that's just ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. Also, I really have to say, I'm pretty offended by someone implying that I'm just blindly marching along to somebody else's beat, because I have done my job and I have read the survey results, and I do have other things going on in my life too, but I'm making it happen because I asked to be a part of this committee. I'm so glad to be on it. And I have learned a ton from my fellow committee members as well as townsfolk. And I'm taking this very seriously. I sit here as a member at large. That means I represent our people from town, the ones I sit beside at the school concerts. I have to be able to look at them and tell them I did my best when I come to a decision about anything that I speak up on here in this committee. And you can bet I take it seriously, and I'm not marching to anybody's beat. I'm doing what I need to do as a participant in this process.
Thank you. Anything else in community feedback?
Yeah, I think Brianna made the good point, but just to close it out, any delay of any project, new construction, delay of renovations, the cost is significant. At 1 year of escalation. And market uncertainty on top of that. It will make these even less financially, more financially impactful, in the long run. Including a failed referendum vote, in all honesty. If it takes a year longer to get to a failed referendum vote, a year where we're not doing anything for the schools, we're trying to minimize significant impactful projects. And then that work that was estimated in 2017 is another year more expensive. Escalation doesn't go down. There's no de-escalation. So
No, it's unfortunately pretty strong these days too, especially with hard goods like 18% to 25%. Okay, anything else on community feedback? Catherine?
I just was gonna ask, I don't know what the correct way to say it is, but I wonder if we can wrap this discussion up, which is probably where you were going, Mike, and move on to the next agenda.
If you hadn't raised your hand, I would have been one step closer.
I made it easier for you. Go ahead.
Anybody else on community feedback? Okay. All right, next agenda item, 7B, project selection. I'm gonna jump in with both feet for discussion. I'm gonna make a motion, and if we get a second on it, then I'll explain. I'm gonna move that we recommend moving forward with new school without the auditorium. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, here's my reasoning. And this is very much in considering public feedback, because our job is not to do or not do a project. Our job is to recommend a project. So looking at it from that point of view, based on public feedback and the intelligent people on this committee and 2 different consultants we've worked with, I see the option I just proposed as being the least disturbance to the educational environment and the least risk to student and employee safety. I see it as the best future educational environment going forward. I see it as the cheapest of all the options we have available, particularly because not doing the auditorium allows the townspeople, if they want the auditorium, to probably buy that at maybe a cheaper price than including it in this project. And item 4, if you look at the numbers on the public feedback, it matches the majority numbers on the public feedback. So least disturbance safety, best educational environment going forward, cheapest, and matches the public feedback. That's my reason for making that motion. So, discussion? And
Mine's a little lengthy, but it summarizes my thoughts if you are willing to oblige me. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. This is a big night for our town. The SBC has been working together for 2 years with Superintendent Phil Stevens, First Selectman Erica Wyszynski, and Scott Pellman from Collier. As a member of the Board of Education, I was involved in the original flyer reports, resulting in 7 options and the process the Board of Ed followed to recommend a new school, a new property with an auditorium. The Board of Ed also spent several meetings developing the educational speculations to the new school would meet our educational program needs. Several members of the SBC wanted to investigate the option of renovating and adding additions onto Hall School. The committee has carefully explored each of the options and has had both land properties assessed and had concept designs created for both, for Hall, and prices calculated. We really need a town vision and an overall plan for the future needs of our town. So the Board of Selectmen is developing a committee who will look at the town and investigate how whatever schools are left vacant, if the new building is approved, could be used. The SBC will offer recommendations, but the Board of Selectmen will make that final decision. It has been important from the start for every town resident to be involved in this decision and process. Our SBC meeting every other Wednesdays have been open to the public and recorded. I want to thank Superintendent Stevens for presenting the 6 workshops at different locations and times to make them accessible to all. We also mailed out 2 postcards to all residents with QR codes to watch the presentation. He also sat with members of the committee at the transfer stations on the weekends to answer questions. A survey was conducted to ask for preferred options with or without auditorium and reasons why. I read each of your comments. Finally, the forum gave us the opportunity to listen to the residents. It was loud and clear that there is a great concern about tax increases. I hope we can find ways to work around this. I think possibly deleting the auditorium is one possibility, and hopefully we can be creative. My choice is to build a new school on a new parcel of land, ideally with an auditorium, but not if to reduce the costs. Having heard the tax concerns, I wonder if there are other creative ways to fund the auditorium. Donations, the sale of property vacated by the building project. We need to play a place to hold town meetings with good technology, and it could also be a source of revenue. We had to postpone a town meeting because we could not all fit in our venue. First of all, it is not cost effective to continue to support 2 old school buildings. They do not meet ADA and modern safety codes. Some residents suggested we update them and continue as is. As we saw with the price of Hall, it is more expensive to renovate, and the reimbursement rate is less since they will only reimburse certain things, excluding replacements. Willington presently contracts with MCOR, and they access each building annually and repair what is necessary, so these old buildings have been maintained. We also have higher priced repairs on the CIP list, and we are way behind. Continuing to put Band-Aids on the buildings is not cost effective. New HVAC systems to a new building will also provide air conditioning and healthy ventilation while saving money for the town. Our enrollment is projected to stay steady at around 400 children, so the new building should meet our projected needs. I have many reasons to support the new school. The cost is less, and there are likely to be fewer surprises. Each time you open a wall at Hall, you might find hazardous chemicals such as lead, asbestos, PCBs, to name a few. If we renovate Hall, the children and staff will be present and could be harmed by these. We can't risk this for our staff and children. These unexpected findings will also increase the cost and the time of the project. The building would take a year or two longer to complete at Hall with students on the premise, so the same children and teachers whose education was disrupted by COVID will be disrupted again. I taught in 3 Mansfield schools when they did a renovation, and I had to move from classroom to classroom 11 times in 2 years. It is very disruptive to education. A new school on new land will be completed in a shorter period of time, and the children will be educated in place until the building is ready to be moved into. We want a 20th century school for our children and teachers. A new school will come with brand new infrastructure and technology, furniture, and flexible learning spaces. We will have 3 large playing fields and room to expand if needed. We can separate the age groups with elementary in one wing and middle school in another, with common spaces in the middle. The buses can also have assigned seating areas to keep older and younger children separated if needed. The state or national government, when the state or national government mandates universal 3- and 4-year-old preschool and grant money might be offered, we will have the land to expand and build the new classrooms. There will also be adequate room for playgrounds and outside classroom instead of squeezing them in on Route 32 as displayed on one of the concept designs. We could develop nature trails for science and perhaps another town park. There is just not enough land at Hall School, and it is under the recommended amount by the state. Route 32 has never been safe for Hall School. The new location presents its challenges, but a traffic study will be conducted and recommendations for traffic lights, etc., suggested to make it safe. The state will insist on a safe plan before they grant funding. There is less parking at Hall and unlimited space at the new site. There were concerns expressed about the water safety at the new site if it had an agricultural pest. Studies are underway, and if it is deemed unsafe, water could be piped in as it is at Hall. I have some concerns too about the ground safety at Hall with 100 years of septic, etc. A new school on new land would give our town the boost it needs. More families with school-age children, UConn professors and employees, and others will be attracted to our rural environment with a beautiful new school with our present talented and dedicated teachers and those it would attract. That will increase our property values and attract new small businesses. Our children are our future, and it is our responsibility to provide them with the best educational experience possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Gary?
Thanks. I do have some comments. There's a lot to say. I'll try to be brief though, but I did want to just make sure that people understood, where I'm coming from on this. First, I want to thank everybody on the committee for your hard work on this. I know, we've been through a lot of hours of meetings, as we all know. Someday we'll be able to reminisce about it and hopefully laugh about it and smile. I also want to thank the community for all your input, especially at the most recent forum and in the events that Mr. Stevens put on for the community with the committee's help. So thank you for that. I want to mention that I'm very aware, I think we all are, that Willington's in a tough spot here. We're in a community, we live in a community that's under 6,000 people. And we're all responsible for the education of the public education of our kids. And that's not a lot of people to spread the cost, any cost around. So I want to make sure that people know that we understand that. And as I mentioned before, we know that this is a significant cost. No matter what we do, there's going to be costs for all of us. We talked about regionalization in the past, not to get too far into the past, but we've talked to other communities about that. That really didn't work out. So it's really on us. It's on Willington to figure this out. Our 53% max reimbursement from the state honestly, that's unjust. I'm glad our state senator is here to hear that. I think he would probably agree. If you look at surrounding communities, similar communities, and in many cases, our demographics are our household incomes are lower than those communities. Our reimbursement rate is much lower. So to me, that's unfair, that's unjust, but it's reality. So we can continue to push those things at the state level, but we really don't have control over that, certainly tonight. Past iterations of the SBC have really decided to kind of, punt this issue down the road. And that when you decide to do that, when you punt the issue down the road, somebody ends up dealing with it. And here we are. Here we are dealing with it now. I don't want to punt down the road. I know that this is a hard decision, and it's going to cause some hardship for all of us. But it's something that needs to be done. We were given a specific charge by the selectmen to come up with a consolidated school plan for a K-8 school. We've done that. We've done our very best. People can have their own opinions about what the best choice is and what the best option is, but I would suggest that everybody on this committee cares about Willington, and they're doing their best to see the best option move forward. In the end, we really looked at two sites. Well, first we looked at 2 existing sites, and then we looked at hundreds of other potential sites. And I know there's some discussion about the site that was selected as the new school option. But honestly, we looked at a ton of different sites, and this was the best one. I know people may not believe it. Some people may not believe it. I think most people do. But it has nothing to do with who owns it or anything like that. It was really the best, by far, really the best site that we looked at. I was on the acquisition subcommittee. So now we're down to 2 viable options. And to me, just to be clear, I think the choice is clear. A new school on a new site is the best option. It's quicker, it's cheaper, and it's superior for the kids that would go there. It's also supported by a majority of the people that have taken the time to comment to us. I know that's counterintuitive to folks to think that a new school on a new site would be cheaper than using something that we have already. But that's the information we have, and it's significantly cheaper. It's not close. So to me, that really doesn't give us 2 options. It's really one option that's significantly better than the other option. People have talked about, Hall being historic. Remember going there, growing up in Willington, totally understand that. My kid goes to Hall now. I understand that to some degree, certainly not as much as people who grew up here and have lived here and gone to those schools. But, the value of that is, unfortunately, in this case, it's not a $6 million value. And maybe beyond that, with the surprises that you could find by trying to rehab Hall School. Also, as I mentioned before, I really took to heart the discussion at the most recent forum about the cost to the taxpayers, the cost to the residents. Like I said, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy investment to make, but it's necessary, and it's necessary to do now for our community, for the future of our community, and for the people that live here. So I think that we need to give the community the option that's the best, the quickest, the cheapest, and the one that's superior for our kids. So I'm going to support Mike's motion this evening. I would also just mention the idea, in case we're going there, that perhaps there's the option of including a separate question on an auditorium. As Ann said, maybe there's other ways to go about looking for funds for that. But to me, the new school on a new site is significantly cheaper, and really taking into account the fiscal responsibility that we're charged with, I think that's the way to go. So thanks very much. People are frozen. Are you guys seeing people frozen?
The room is frozen.
Oh
The
gosh.
room is frozen.
Maybe they didn't hear
Okay.
anything I said.
It was.
It was well said, Gary.
Yes.
We heard you, Gary. Well said.
Okay, hopefully they heard part of it.
Hopefully it's recorded too.
Oh, gosh,
It
the
should
whole room
be.
disappeared.
Can anyone from the room hear us? No.
I noticed that they were just all leaving the room, so they're probably gonna start it up again. Phil just left, Erica left. I
Thank
don't
you
know.
for that.
Yeah.
All right.
I still see recording actually happening right now, so that's good.
Yes.
Okay, so I would just say, so this is probably still the official meeting, so we should refrain from beyond talking about that. We shouldn't talk about anything else yet until they're back.
Agreed.
Till the chairman's back. If that's all right with everybody.
It is a great time for a restroom break.
Yeah, take a break, get a drink of water, go to the restroom.
Be right
Thanks.
back.
Right, okay, so the wireless is there, but it's.
Yeah.
Right.
Everyone, please stand by. Can you hear me out there?
Yes.
Okay, just please stand by while we try to figure out what happened.
Thank you.
Do you have the number of the Frontier to see if they're working?
All the fiber optic people are working all over town tonight. There are trucks all over town in the dark working. I wonder if someone snagged something.
Well, I mean, I would think, can you see how many people, can I see your?
Yeah, see what you can.
Mike, we're still on.
Can
Yeah.
you tell us, Catherine, how many people are still in the meeting?
45.
All right, so, there were,
Dropped all the lost. We had
Right.
55 and there was.
Right. So it's just this, it says to me, it's probably just this building if nobody outside
Yeah.
of here is.
It seems to be just you guys. But I mean,
we
there may
could-
be one or two. but-
Absolutely, you can record.
Yeah, the
From there.
meeting's being
Oh, I
recorded.
wanted to see
Yeah,
who
it's still
the,
being recorded.
somebody is the host, it's still being
Yeah,
recorded.
it's me.
Chris,
Do you want it to still be
Oh,
recorded?
Chris, you win.
Yeah,
Chris,
I did.
You win.
Do you want me to
Chris,
make
you-
you host, Mike?
No, because I'm doing it on a phone,
That's fine. We'll
so it
hang
would be
tight.
easier if you hold on to it.
You do have a wireless speaker.
Hang on, we're working on getting a wireless speaker set up here.
It needs to go on for my phone.
For everyone out there who's listening to the meeting, we're just sort of holding in pause at the moment while we solve this technological problem. All meeting action stopped when the internet went out.
What was the last thing Gary said?
Yeah, did you guys hear anything Gary said?
Please say you
We
heard
heard Gary.
something.
We heard Gary for quite a while. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. The whole screen froze and then we lost the whole screen in here.
Can you, ask Crystal to pause it, let's press pause.
Chris Delona, can you pause the recording?
I could pause the recording.
Okay, it's 9:02 PM. We had a technological glitch that stopped some of this meeting from happening. This is a continuation of the February 1st, 2023 school building committee meeting. All right, Gary.
Yes.
We were somewhere just past the point where you said you were going to support the motion and some reasons for supporting that motion. I think we go out to somewhere in there.
Oh, good. I think I was almost done. So I was, I was just going to say that I support Mike's motion, and then I also added the potential opportunity to maybe add a second question on the auditorium. So I think that was really the end of my comments. I know that Anne before had suggested some other ways to perhaps go about that. But just a suggestion. And again, thanks to everybody for all the work, and I'll let somebody else speak. I guess my comments are recorded, so thank you.
Gary, everyone just be patient because we're scanning screen to screen here. Brianna, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Now that everyone's had a little bit before. Okay, we are a school building committee, but a school is so much more than a building. And for some children, it is the closest sense of home they have ever felt. I have seen this myself in my profession as recently as today. At school, they are loved, accepted, supported, and encouraged. They have access to books, games, art supplies, music, friends, food, and physical, mental, and emotional health care. There is dependable consistency. School gives kids a place to learn and grow, and it can show them that possibilities for their lives are endless. What is 21st century learning? The jobs and experiences that our children will have as adults are far beyond what exists now. Technology and innovation changes constantly. 21st century learning helps prepare students to be the kind of quality workers and productive citizens we're going to rely on in our future. They need to be prepared for an increasingly globalized world. The goal is for students to master content while producing, synthesizing, and evaluating information from a wide variety of subjects and sources with an understanding of and respect for diverse cultures. School staff members achieve this goal by supporting students' responsibility for their own education by facilitating an inquiry-based environment. When I reach an advanced state of life, I hope to be surrounded by professionals who learned in this way. Maybe you will too. For example, do you want a doctor to rely on only a textbook to diagnose an ailment? Would you rather have a healthcare provider that can be creative and think outside the box, pool resources, including collaborating with other professionals, communicate with you and your family clearly, and give you the best possible path toward wellness? I think that everyone in all professions or fields of the future will benefit from the development of 21st century skills. That's what we're trying to do with our kids. Thank you to all of the citizens who have spoken up or written in about your thoughts on how this committee should proceed. I've been listening closely because this seat on the SBC is for a member at large, and that means I sit here with and for you. Many adults of various ages have shared their views, but there is one voice that remains on my mind and on my heart. And I think Catherine already brought this up a bit, and I can't stop thinking about it. Last week at the community forum, 7th grader and HMS athlete Brendan Ayers chose to stand in front of everyone gathered in that gymnasium and speak at the lectern. Imagine a youngster confident and passionate enough to do such a thing. Imagine a community that is welcoming and supportive enough that Brendan knew his voice would be heard. That is us, Willington. Brendan shared his hope for a school where the baseball team could actually host a home game at a ball field on the school's property. That's pride. Kids want to take pride in their school facility, and I invite them all to participate in all of these conversations going forward, like Rain and Thomas did as well. Willington, we have pretty great pizza, but it is the children, the students, our future that we should be most proud of. They represent all of us, the way we care for one another, the way we celebrate together in this town, the way we conduct ourselves in the face of adversity, and the way we come together even in light of a tragedy. They are watching and they are learning from us more than we even know. Every child from our town goes out into the world and carries a bit of the Willington spirit with them. And when people ask where they're from, I want them to say our name with pride and feel us standing behind them and cheering them on. So here's my choice. We must do something drastic to improve the state of our schools, and we need to do it now. The buildings are not going to get younger, and sadly, neither are we. And costs are not going to decrease, even though it would be really great if they could. I support the recommendation to build a new pre-K to 8th grade school on a new site. This option offers room for expansion, the opportunity to begin with a clean slate, and a faster timeline that does not negatively impact the students' present learning environment. I am hopeful that we can add an auditorium sooner rather than later. The need for active community involvement continues. The committee must work towards identifying future uses of the 2 current school buildings as per our charge. The town has not purchased any parcels of land at this time. And questions and concerns about things like traffic at a new site are still valid. And I believe we can work together to find creative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Someone in the room want to go?
I'll say something. I won't let you guys speak.
You probably need to put that.
Can you?
Yeah, hang on.
Here.
We'll get you on camera.
So, which is it this?
That's your microphone.
Thank you.
This is your camera.
So this is convenient, right, everybody? So now I'm going to speak too loud to y'all. No, so I thought a lot about, I am the new guy here, honestly, and I'm honored to be here with you all. I've worked hard since the appointment on the Board of Finance and in this committee to get up to speed beyond what a member of the public would be able to do on available information. So in my, and I'm very sensitive to the fact, and I don't know how I vote on this. If I'm going to vote, I haven't made that decision at all. But I'm going to look at this in a way, having been an active member in present to speak and following along for years now. And that I'm going to say what I would have said if I were in present to speak, because you would have heard it anyway. So what I will say is from my, I come from this from both the professional and personal perspective. And in both of those cases, they're really, for the matter at hand, which is not about the cost of a new school, the ability to fund a new school, the decision at hand, and I'll stay as specific to that as I can be, as to whether or not we're going with a new school on a new site or a renovation of Hall. And between those two options, in both cases, there really is no choice. The new purpose-built building on a new site is the only choice. It is cheaper, it is less disruptive, it is less risky, it is a shorter time period, there is no comparison between the two in my mind. Professionally, personally, I have 2 students that are going to be, one of them is going to be in Hall next year, and my son will hopefully be able to take advantage of this new school, whatever it becomes, for his entire education. The thought of 3 years of interruption when we have another option. So what I would say, and I think it was Gary that made it, I am torn on, I would be torn on the decision on the auditorium. I do see a value to it for this community and for the school population. I would not be able to personally support any version of this where the auditorium is mandated as an option for any option. Again, I support the new school, but I would I mean, there are creative ways around it at a cost savings. Gymnatoriums can be done effectively when new and purposely built. They are much better than the bleachers we sit on at Hall currently. You know, and they can provide an improved environment. I would, however, like to see if there is an opportunity to give the town, especially given the responses on that survey, and I did take the time to read every word in it, the survey results. You know, particularly given the yes with auditorium vote, I'd like to.
He's cutting in and out a little bit, Mike. I don't know if you can still hear us.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if he's still talking. Is he still talking?
Mike, can you
Mike,
unmute
yeah.
you unmute yourself so we can hear you maybe?
How about?
Yeah, we can hear you. But he
Okay.
cut off right when he was talking about the auditorium.
Yeah.
Okay, he was talking about the auditorium, yep.
Good, so we're basically done. Yeah, I'd support a second question to put it before the town to see if they wanted to fund the auditorium. It's largely because of the interest here. I just couldn't support the auditorium as the only choice, specifically for the cost and plan and being sensitive to that. So thank you, everybody, for all your hard work. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
So
we've
we
got
can
a-
hear that it's getting a little iffy though.
Okay, yeah, he's a little further away from this phone. I'll try to be careful of that. Someone else in the room before I go back to online?
I'm still going with my decision.
Okay.
I know I'm sticking with my decision, what the right thing to do is. I feel one way as a taxpayer and as I sit on this committee, what the right thing to do is. I'm gonna have to make that choice one way or another. It's part of being here and volunteering to be here.
All right, let's go to Catherine. You may have to mute this time.
Thank you, Mike. I just wanted to echo what a lot of people said so far with respect to thanking everybody on the committee for being a part of this committee and really dedicating your times. I was fortunate to have been the chairperson for the first 2 years of the project of this committee, and it's been a pleasure working with everybody. And, you know, the expertise that we have, I think, is really a well-rounded experience, and it's really helpful in looking at each aspect of this entire process. So thank you for that. So when I look at this, I'm wearing multiple hats, right? I'm a parent, I'm a Willington resident. I think most of you are in the same boat. Some are teachers, some are professional experts. But to me, it's very simple. Our taxes are gonna go up no matter what, whether it's a new firehouse, whether it's a new housing complex or a senior center or an addition to an existing town hall building. So our taxes are going to go up. The question is really, where do you want your taxpayers' dollars to go? And for me, I would much rather have my tax dollars going to providing a new school for the future of our kids. So this, to me, is the best option for our town to invest our tax dollars into the most cost-effective manner. It's a cheaper option. New school, new site. It's a faster timeline. And most importantly, it is not interrupting the education of our students. That is the most important thing. We cannot interrupt another year repeating what's happened with COVID. We can't repeat that year after year in a construction project. So To me, I support a new school on a new site. I too would recommend that maybe we have a second question for the auditorium, but I'd also like to offer a consideration that in order to have a cohesive design with a new school and an auditorium, we should authorize the design of the auditorium at the same time as the school itself. Excuse me. So that would be my recommendation, but I do support the new school, new site option. Thank you.
Thank you. Go back to the room. Ralph, hang on a second. Let me just,
I got the camera.
oh, you got the camera? Okay. Yeah. Go ahead and just, someone from the committee out there, if you can't hear Ralph properly, please tell me. Just pass it. It's on speakers. You don't have to put it right up to your mic.
All right, let's see. Testing. Somebody? Good. Everything that's been said tonight, I for the most part agree with. There's a couple of facets of it that I do not. I'm not very good at flowery language and you know, praising every little thing that comes along the way. But I do agree that we need a new educational facility in this town. I just hope that at the end of it all, there will be people who can still afford to live here to enjoy that school. And I am very concerned that we are in a bubble looking at the financial aspect of this and not considering the entire government in town. And for that reason and that reason alone, I will vote no on this. Not because I disagree with it, but because I don't think we can afford it until we have an expansion of our grand list that can help pay for it. We will drive people out and I will be one of them. That's it.
Do you want to speak, Peter?
Go to the first.
Okay. Committee members who are online. I'm scrolling through. All right, any of you, Chris Talona, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'll just, as we all have shared our thoughts, me being a part of this team in a precarious kind of way, being kind of the one staff member, not really related to the town district, but I've, remaining neutral, and I've always said I'm going to try to go with what feedback we receive, and with what we found recently, costs being the major concern, and then also the feedback we received with the night, where we had the community night, and then also the survey results and the emails. And I would, because of those things, support a new school, a new site, as it being the cheaper cost, as we've all said, and kind of taking the feedback from the town itself. That's all.
Thank you. Peter, would you like to go now?
I suppose I fall into that category Brianna just spoke about. I am at that advanced age. And I sense that I probably don't fit very well into the 21st century paradigm that we hear a lot about. And I think I'm like one of James's simple folk who just sense that with this new school option on a new site, we are paying more to get less. And that just doesn't make sense to me. That coupled with we have to decide now and then tell the people what the cost is after we've decided troubles me even more. the cost is a concern. It's a reality in every project. I think we all know that. We've all worked on projects in our professional and personal lives. To say that it's not our responsibility is incorrect. What's most striking to me about this, and I'm staring at the breakdown Phil did for us on assessments in town, because we were making the assumption that the average home in Willington, and I think we've been doing it for years, is 200,000. Phil's research showed that's not true. The average assessment in town, when I say assessment, that's the 70% value, of course, that the town places on your home, not the market value, but it's a good gauge. And that average is actually 130,000, not 200,000, as Phil demonstrated to us when he did the research. When you look at the breakdown, you'll see that 19% of the homes in our town are valued at between $1 and $50,000. That was stunning to me. 8% are between 50 and 100,000. That's 27% of the town at these relatively low values. If you extend it out even further to the 100 to 150 range, which is kind of where Phil's average of 130 falls in, that's another 33%, or 60% of the town. What that tells me is we're asking those with the least to bear the largest burden of this project. And even though that's not our major consideration as a building committee, that has a big impact on me. And I can't just dismiss it as, well, taxes always go up. And we heard a number of people at the forum say, if this happens, I have to leave town. And it's hard for me not to consider that. And for all of those reasons, I cannot support your motion, Mike.
Okay. Anybody else in the room before I go back out to the? All right, I'll try. Okay, committee members who are online. Any more comments on the motion? I think everyone.
All voting members spoke.
Yeah. Okay, any more comments on the motion from anyone on the committee?
Everyone's,
Yeah.
every voting member spoke.
Do we want to discuss the auditorium?
It's not this motion. All right, let's go to a vote. We'll go to a roll call right from the beginning on this one. Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Mike,
What, Ann?
Mike, talking about the auditorium, should that extra question on the ballot possibly be a part of this motion as a friendly motion?
I think it would be better for us to do that as a separate discussion.
Okay, excellent. Would you?
Because
Okay. Go ahead.
my motion was very simply that we recommend the new school without the auditorium. That's all the motion is.
Okay, thank you. I will do the roll call. Okay,
Okay,
would you read them? Okay, we just repeated that. All right, very good. All right, Mike,
yes.
Brianna,
Aye.
Justin,
Yes.
James,
You come to me at the end.
come back. Okay, Catherine,
Yes, yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Ralph,
No.
Peter,
No.
Chris,
Yes.
Anne, yes, and then going back to James.
I'm gonna say yes for the sake of,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
We have 8 yeses and 2 nos.
Motion carries. I'll just comment. I know this is difficult. I appreciate everyone's input in it. Okay. I think since it is in, I guess it's in the topic of project selection, do we want to talk about the auditorium thing at all? Or should we get some advice on what the proper legal process would be? Because we can't include it in the base question if it's not going to be funded. It has to be a separate question for the state funding.
So I'll share with you some of the research we've done on this, anticipating that there could be any number of combinations of projects. And I did ask the question, could there be 2 separate questions? An if this, then this. And the answer simply is yes. I will tell you, our attorneys don't love that if a question says shall and then you add a second question, but it is possible and it has been done by others. So you're looking now to put forth a question for a new school on a new site. You could have a discussion about if this passed, adding something else in, and so they would be taken separately. So one could pass and one could fail. Or they could both pass, but that is up to this committee.
And I believe the timeline doesn't have, the second question doesn't have to be dealt with tonight. But it would have to be dealt with by the time of the call of the referendum.
Well,
or the call of the town meeting.
the referendum town meeting are called at the same time. So it would have to be done before that, but
Yes.
that also needs to be part of the 8-24 review. The question put before Board of Finance and the questions put before Board of Selectmen. So I would say if this committee is doing that, that decision would need to be part of a process before all those things move forward.
Understood. Question over here.
No,
Comment. Yeah.
what is to prevent us from putting that forward with an ad alternate for an auditorium? As a single question. And
It's unfortunate we don't have Scott here because Scott, I think, understands the complexities of navigating the state and the OSCGR process. There is definitely a line we have to make sure that we're not crossing to keep it separate so we don't get that penalty.
but you understand the benefit of an ad alternate.
Yes.
Are you saying?
You'd have to take the higher amount. If it is an ad alternate, you'd have to carry the higher amount of the auditorium. With the auditorium.
I think you have to, Catherine is saying you'd have to carry for the financial package, you'd have to carry the higher amount. Otherwise, you don't have authorization to
Exactly.
keep the ad alternate.
Yeah.
I think it would create I think you have to consider it a separate, maybe an option.
So I will say that some of
Okay.
the potential questions that would be in a referendum, again, these are things that are based on what would be needed for an application for a school building project. And they were laid out very clearly for us that would be if this, then you're asking for separate dollars. So they would be a separate amount for a separate project, an add-on project.
Catherine,
What's that?
your hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Erica was asking a question. You wanted me to answer it. Sorry.
No.
I'm gonna look for the.
Yeah. So my question was, Mike, you had asked if the committee was okay with moving forward with the new school, new site. And then as far as the auditorium piece, I just had a question about that. If it's going to allow us to have this discussion, can we put on the agenda for the next meeting to talk about the auditorium specifically, or what is it that we need to come out of this meeting tonight?
Well, I guess that's sort of what we're debating. We have the motion that was just voted on, which would essentially move things into the next steps through the rest of the calendar that Erica has laid out before. We have to then move on to those next steps. I guess the question really is how quickly do we have to deal and what is the right way to deal with the auditorium question? So the taxpayers have the opportunity to vote on that also.
Right.
But I think everyone kind of feels we don't want it lumped into this project because there's too much penalty.
The way a question would look would be, shall the town of Willington appropriate X dollars to fund the cost of a design for a pre-K through 8 school on blank road and authorize the issuance of bonds, notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed the finance appropriation. So that's the question for the project. If
Yeah.
we were to add a second question, it would read, shall the town of Willington appropriate X dollars to fund? Shall the town of Willington appropriate an additional X amount of dollars to fund the cost of the design and construction of an approximately X square foot auditorium at the school and authorize the issuance of bonds, notes, temporary notes in the amount not to exceed X dollars to finance the additional appropriation? So it would be an additional question with an additional cost estimate and square footage estimate, if that's the way you chose to go.
So based on that legal information, if this committee were to choose tonight, we could move and see if we approved a motion to recommend a auditorium as a second question.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, is there some hesitation?
Be very clear about whether you're doing it as a separate project from OSCGR, or if that the way that is worded, it is part of the OSCGR application.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to
You're
figure out the
an
difference.
additional amount of dollars.
That's what I'm trying to figure out the difference so that we get this right.
Mike, Ann has her hand up, but I was just gonna recommend that can we put it on the agenda for our next meeting and consult with Scott on the actual process of how to navigate that?
You can, but it just changes your time frame.
So basically, we would,
We can do anything we want, but it completely alters the schedule that we have in place.
or we have to call a special meeting.
Let's do that. That's what I would recommend.
Ann, go ahead.
I kind of like this approach because we already know that we have the school going to the referendum and that can be handled separately. But this is really our chance to get our hand on the pulse of what the townspeople want to do. Maybe they really want the auditorium and maybe it will pass and maybe they are willing to spend the money. Maybe they're not, and then it gets voted down, and then we go back to the drawing table and maybe try to come up with some creative ideas to do it in a different way. But I think this gives the townspeople a chance to speak to this issue, and we get to see how they feel.
Can I make a comment, Mike?
Go ahead.
So, I'm a non-voting member at this committee, so I speak cautiously as to not sway anyone in any one direction. But with that, I will say it's the responsibility of this committee to make that decision. That's what we're charged with. So there should be robust conversation about whether or not you want to move forward the possibility of additional dollars for an auditorium, right? We were charged with the difficult task and a project with great importance and great cost. And so I would suggest that you have that discussion now. If you're considering moving forward the question of an auditorium, debate that here and now.
I'm more concerned with us doing it the right way. I agree with the comment you just made, but I want to do it the right way. So since our recommendation, since our motion is simply the recommendation, and then the next process is where the legal language comes in starting at the selectmen, right?
OSCGR will look at your motion.
So we have to do another motion with that language?
No, that's the motion that's gonna, that would be.
That's the motion that goes.
That's a potential referendum question.
Right. So what I'm saying is so that agrees with what my thought process is. If we simply make a recommendation tonight, that the taxpayers be asked whether they support a separate project to add the
I would say if you want
auditorium, then as it goes through the process after here, the correct legal language can get put into it.
But the process after this point, and I think I laid this out for you all, again, based on this timeline, if you want to change the timeline, that's certainly up to this committee.
But the process from here moves to other boards and commissions who have work to do. So if you want to take more time to make your decision, you absolutely have that choice, but it changes the timeline.
But it does not change the timeline on moving forward with everything we just agreed to move forward with.
Yes, it does, because part of the 8-24 review.
Does it have
and
to
same
say that it
process,
includes the auditorium in the 824 review? It can't just be a school?
Right, I think it's one, you're doing one or both, and you would like that to be a separate question moving forward. If this, then this. If that's the way you're
The
thinking.
824 review is school use appropriate for the
It-
town, the location?
But an
the
entire
use?
project is what's going to be moved forward to that. Not a piecemeal project.
Right, and what I'm saying is, I think to keep out of trouble with OSCGR, we have to do it as a separate project. It might just happen together.
Well, I think you're assuming though that it's a separate project that's not grant funded.
Yes,
I'm not sure that's what this group is saying.
okay,
We
so,
based it on
so
being grant funded.
all right, so we can go to that. My assumption is because, and that's why I made the motion the way I did, is that we should not. It's a bad recommendation to include a
Auditorium.
auditorium in this project because we get penalized too much for it. I think the towns, we get financially, we get penalized too much for including it. We can't include it. It's not fiscally responsible.
And that's what your motion was. So your motion.
That's
was
why my
clear
motion
on a
was
new
just a
with no
school.
Auditorium. So I would say you've already made that decision.
Yeah, I want to stay out of the grant process for the auditorium question.
So then I would say, if you want to go forward with funding for an auditorium, it's either at a different time or you.
A different motion, maybe.
I mean, a completely different, to Peter's point, it's a completely different project. Mike moved a project that did not include an auditorium, even as a secondary question, and you all voted 8-2 in favor of that.
Okay, let's get some, we've got everyone's hands up. Gary.
I'm sorry, I'm taking my hand down. I don't know what I was gonna say.
Excellent, short comment, thank you.
Yeah.
Catherine.
Yeah, I'm wondering what I was gonna say too. No, I was just gonna recommend, so Eric is right. We did just make a motion to vote on a new school, new site without the auditorium in that language. So I think we're done, but I guess so that we're not ignoring the auditorium, is it possible to do a second motion on just the auditorium? But it sounds like not. It sounds like we already made our decision and it's off the table now. Is that correct?
Well, I think we still have opportunities. The problem is, I think we need to hear from everyone to make sure we all have the same understanding. So I'll get around to the rest of the people on the committee. And
Okay.
then we may not have enough information about the way we word this next step to do it properly.
Thank you.
Okay, Brianna, you had your hand up. Is it? Good.
Yes, I would love an auditorium. I think that's a place where a lot of kids find themselves, find their strengths, and find their place. And I was kind of surprised looking at survey results. There were a lot of people who said the same: auditorium, auditorium, auditorium. So I think we definitely need to put it somewhere.
Hang on just a second. I gotta. Okay, carry on.
We're back.
No worries. So I'm trying to follow you all with this thing. So can it say at the top, the first, because we've had votes before where there was like, yes or no to this, yes or no, do you want to add this, haven't we?
I think you're right, Brianna, and that is a possibility. Yes, you can and just end.
No, that's
Oh, because you're the host.
It made me host.
Hold on, you need to pick someone else to host.
Sorry about the.
But because you just made a motion that was completely different than that, right? So you didn't take action, this is my opinion. You didn't take action that allowed something additional. I think the motion Mike put forward was very specific in a new.
But I don't think it's not one or the other. It would be yes or no to the first one, and then the second question is really an addition. So to me, that would make sense. It would be a totally different motion to add a question to the referendum. I don't know.
But your committee just voted a project that did not include that. So it gets a little dicey to now add a question for an auditorium. You just voted again.
I disagree.
Okay, I just dropped my phone out, so we get rid of the feedback once you took over as
I'm
host.
trying to.
Sorry, Brianna, we are paying attention to you. We're just trying to keep the technology.
Yeah. If we had an auditorium, this would never happen.
Oh, yeah.
She says again.
Okay, let me get some people in the room here.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I'm not sure, based upon what you just said and what Erica just read, that this group has the answers. And I don't know.
I don't think we do.
I don't know that we want to say that. I don't know that I want to say that. But I think when Catherine just said, maybe we need to have a special meeting and post it tomorrow and try and reconvene on Friday with Scott Tillman here. Because my understanding of what you just said was not what I thought. I thought you were saying added as a second question as part of the project that's also funded through OSCGR. So I think that's question one conversation. And then question two is if it exists at all, if there is a second question. So, and you can combine those projects, Erica, what you read there, you could add 3 projects on. If you wanted to say, we want to add a turf field, you could do that as a, if this, then this, if this,
But it all
not this, but
packages
we
it
want this. And it's
to OSCGR.
correct. And so what you see is all of the votes of this committee, that's packaged in minutes into OSCGR. And whatever you package also impacts how you move forward with the legislative process for the vote.
I agree with all that, though, but it was a very specific motion that said a new school without an auditorium. I
It
wanna be
does
sure I heard
not
that.
stop a second motion if you
Right.
want to.
That's why I said they
Right.
need to debate it here,
Right.
but I think
But without and that's my point. How do you debate it if you don't know what the response is?
Right.
Is because
but you know if you want it or not, right? So that if they can have a discussion as to whether or not that's something they want to move forward with as a majority. If the majority is a no, it's a little bit of a point. I don't know where those votes
All
are.
right,
Liz
other,
has her hand up.
yeah, I'm just getting a couple people in the room. Other thoughts on this?
I still love to give the people a chance to,
Make a choice.
Decision. They may vote it down, I don't think it should be the only choice we get.
And
I think by placing the question on the referendum, if we vote to do that, we're showing our approval of either option, either without the auditorium or adding on the auditorium. So, and then we're leaving it to the townspeople to decide which of those options they would be willing to support financially, because I think it's really a financial decision.
thank you. Catherine, your hand is still up. Do you have more?
I do. I was just gonna comment, Anne has a really good point with that the committee would select either option if that question was on the referendum. However, we have not voted as a committee whether or not we're gonna support the auditorium. So I think the next step is really to make a motion for the new school, new site with the auditorium. And let's count the votes there so that we can all pipe in on the auditorium piece. So I don't know, that's my opinion.
That sounds messy to me. That sounds super messy.
What we just approved.
So how does the committee members who already voted new school, new site pipe in as to whether or not they want an auditorium or not before it goes to referendum?
We've already decided by them approving the motion to send forward new school without auditorium. So.
Can we make a friendly amendment, Mike?
No, it's done. It's already voted on.
Yeah.
But could we have a new motion that says that we wish to add this option to the referendum also, to add the auditorium.
That's a question of how we do that. And the biggest thing I feel is our responsibility, and I believe when it goes to the Board of Finance, they're gonna echo, is we can't get the auditorium lumped back in to the OSCGR project because we actually get penalized for that. And that just doesn't make any sense. So we have to make sure we word this properly and allow the taxpayers to decide if they want to fund it separately, which they'll get it cheaper for probably, than putting it in the project. The number's so close. I talked about it with Scott on the phone a week or two ago. The number's so close that without the space waiver, which we don't know, obviously, if we can get, that it might actually turn out to be slightly cheaper to pay for it completely separately, out of pocket, if you will, than it is to include in the project because the penalty is so high.
I mean, I haven't seen Scott's detail to that end, but from the square foot cost, it as a standalone building, it could be slightly cheaper than the difference that we're seeing in the two numbers. They're close. I agree. Yeah. And I don't have the benefit of, Scott's detail.
So, Brianna?
Can the auditorium stand alone as an OSCGR project?
That's an interesting question. That, again, that's a Scott question, because the OSCGR would fund half of it. They would fund it at half of the population, then multiplied by all the correct square footage factors and all their other stuff according to their formula. So at 415 or whatever our number was, they would fund 207
If it can,
students worth of auditorium.
yeah, I mean, obviously, if we can get some funding for it, that would be the way I think most folks would prefer to go. I am willing to gather for a special meeting once we figure out what is necessary here to get that on our
I
referendum.
think if the consensus of the committee, and I'll keep asking for opinions on this, but I think if the consensus of the committee is to get more advice on this before we act, to me, that feels like the prudent thing, because I don't want to start a course of action that messes this all up.
Yes, and I hope the public is hearing that there is interest and support for it because they asked for it too.
There are many comments asking for the auditorium.
Yeah.
Catherine may have her hand up.
Any more discussion on this? Catherine?
Yeah, I still feel like if we did a second motion to add the auditorium to the new school, let's take a vote for the committee members if we would support an auditorium, because we haven't, the initial motion that you made, Mike, was without it. So maybe we just ask the question, would you support it? And if we don't, if we're not going to support it, we're going to say no. If we are, we'll say yes. But at least we have it on record that we're supporting it or not. And part two of that, I am curious to hear Gary's response when he said that suggestion is kind of messy. It gets messy. So I'm curious to hear why he feels that way.
Because I think his comment I echoed also was because we had already made a motion. But I'll let me go to your first thing you said.
Yeah.
I feel like it's risky if we put a motion on the record tonight in the same minutes as the minutes that are going to be the basis of the beginning of the OSCGR process.
Why?
Because like I keep saying, if they lump that auditorium into the OSCGR process, we get penalized for it.
Well, so I don't know that when you keep saying that we get penalized for it, all they're doing is they're looking at the square footage of the auditorium and they're only going to reimburse for 50% of it. So it's not
That's not all. No, that's not true, because they also add that square footage into the whole project and they add their penalty factor for us being over the 57,000 on the ed spec. The formula the state has gives us 57,000, as you know, ish. And that square footage of the auditorium, if you include it in OSCGR project, adds to the penalty for being over square footage.
All right, I gotcha.
So that's the double whammy on it. They only fund half of it, but then they also count that square footage and penalize you. And I checked that with Scott to be sure I understood that clearly.
Yeah, you're correct. I guess where I'm coming from is, and I know we just voted on the new school, new site, but I guess the motion was, it was kind of left open, like we'll get to decide on the auditorium later.
No, it wasn't.
No.
Okay,
No, it
so why
wasn't.
are we even talking about it? If the decision is done, we already voted, we should be done. Auditorium's off the table. But people are talking about adding it to the referendum. Well, we can't add it as to the referendum option if we didn't vote on it. Am I missing
We're
something?
summarizing exactly what we're wrestling with. But
Okay,
it's not that clear.
all right. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something because it just,
Gary, would you like to respond to the comment about things getting messy?
Sure, I think I've already, this conversation has proved what I meant. So I just, I won't say much more. I don't, we should not mess with the motion that we already made. Any risk of that, we should not touch. I was going to ask what the harm would be in just making a motion that, and again, this is a recommendation. It would, a motion of a recommendation that we include another question on the referendum for a separate auditorium. But I've been convinced now that I think it's wiser to wait. I think, I don't think it's wise to act this evening just with the lateness of the hour and the fact that we don't have Scott here.
Thank you.
yeah, and I guess my comment to what Gary's saying with the recommendation is, why are we even recommending it to go on as a question if we as a committee already voted to do the new school, new site without the auditorium?
A couple people in our I'm sorry to interrupt. A couple people in our comments mentioned that it might be a possibility. So I think that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, can I say something?
Go ahead.
Catherine, your original comment when we started this was, can we do another motion for a new school, new site with an auditorium? That ship has sailed. You cannot do that. What you can do now, because the motion that's already passed is for a new school, new site.
Yeah.
What you can do now is any of the if this, then that questions, and it would only be for that specific item. It's not, you wouldn't say anything more about a new school, new site. You would just simply say, if question 1 passes, would you also approve X for X dollars at this square footage? That can be added.
To the
But
referendum question?
You can add a secondary question, absolutely.
But we haven't voted on that yet. That's my
That's because
dilemma.
there hasn't been a motion for that.
Okay,
But the caveat to that is it needs to be clear, and this is where I think the issue is right now, is what I was thinking is not what Mike was thinking. Because we have not seen the data. You have seen the data. We have not, this committee has not seen any data for the cost of an auditorium outside of OSCGR and the dollars that we have. The quote that we have is the number with a new school, new site with an auditorium, all through OSCGR. We do not have a dollar figure out to have a separate project. And I would say that what you have for legal language is tied to OSCGR.
I don't think so. I mean, it's
In
based
other words,
on-
we don't have enough information to dip in our toe in this water.
That's my point,
Yes.
that's why I think if you're going to do something, you should make sure you do it right. It wouldn't be it's not necessarily an OSCGR thing, because it just wouldn't be in the application if it wasn't there.
It's a matter of staying away from the OSCGR.
Let's do it right, and I think that means that,
We're gonna talk to Scott tomorrow.
yeah.
Right, I mean, you could build whatever we wanted if we were willing to pay for it
That's
outside
correct.
of those state frameworks.
Correct.
Yes.
But we have had zero discussions amongst the committee or the townspeople of fully funding the bill, even if it is less, because it hadn't been proposed to us that it would be less.
Well, if you even look at the simple math of the different options, the 4 options, it comes out anyway. The delta for the auditorium is approximately $6 million, and you lose it all in that math.
But I would argue you probably don't lose all of the square footage, right? Because then you're talking about a gymatorium
which is built into the number for a new school.
But the square footage would be different,
Correct.
Right.
which changes the,
Okay, have we beat this horse enough yet?
I think so.
Gary
Okay.
says, yeah.
All right, are we done with new business? I will communicate to the committee right away, whatever answers we can get from Scott in the next 24 hours or whatever. We'll try to get some, I'll get it out to the committee and determine if there's even the ability to act on this any further.
Makes sense.
Okay. Present to speak.
We put that, but-
Well,
Yeah, except I'm no longer on.
They tell
Here
me.
hang on, we're getting to
Mr.
people
Teller has
online.
his hand up.
All right, Nick Teller, go ahead.
Hey, Nick Teller, 49 Myrtle. So I just want to start off with saying, my kids go to a school that was built in 1921. They have no high technology this 21st century or anything. The teachers there, they're probably making half of what the Willington teachers are making. It's a private school. Students there are scoring at 2 to 4 grades on average ahead of where their grade is. For example, kids in 3rd grade are at fifth grade for reading and writing. The reason I say that is to show that it's an example. It's not a brand new school that creates a kid's success, because it ultimately lies at the feet of the parents, the kids, and then the teachers. It doesn't fall to a shiny new school. So the argument to get 21st century school to improve kids' education is completely flawed. Willington at the end of 2022 for grades 3 to 8 had almost 50% at grade level or above. And to start 23, all the kids were not meeting grade level except for one category. I believe it was grade 7, and that had to do with math. What we need is parents to step up and be more involved in the kids' education, students to want to care about their future, and we need the teachers to deliver on their end. So I see 256 people are recorded as attending forums and such in town out of 5,500. It shows that we need to continue to get the message out there. I understand when we go for elections, we're door knocking all the time to get people to vote for us. Are we going door knocking to inform the people, or no, because there's no votes on the line? If the new school passes in the town, and we don't get the waivers, I hope that there's a way that this can come back to the voters to reconsider this project. I hear new school, new site, it's a cheaper option. And to me, again, that's a flawed statement that's misleading, because we don't know all the options. We don't know what the costs are to center and hall and the roads. So to say that it's the cheapest option is completely misleading. To respond to Brianna's comments, I and some in the community do feel that you guys are just checking the boxes, moving along, and rushing this through just to get it approved. I mean, everybody coming in this meeting, we knew it was going to be a new school. The agenda has been out there, and everybody knows where this SBC wants to go. Just the manipulation in the data. I mean, we saw only one disadvantage on the postcards sent out, and then when we saw the tax information come out, it wasn't cumulative. And you saw at the 26th meeting, a lot of people were stunned that that information that they saw was not what they thought it was. It's also misleading that those years only went 5 years out and not to 10 years and such. Because when we do that information, when we do that calculation, we see that the mill rate ends up going up to 50, 55 mil. The SBC doesn't know the least expensive options because that charge purposely has been left out. It's clear as day we need to pause this rush to force a new school on the taxpayer. I understand you guys already voted for it to go to vote, but it's unfortunate. I hear the formula doesn't work for our type of community. Why don't we take a year to extend this charge with amendments to do it, to get the answers, and maybe talk to the representatives to get changes so these formulas do work for Willington and smaller towns. I hear at times that if we went with the upgrades instead, being the $20 million options, we're just going to get hit with $20 million at a time. Nobody's even saying do $20 million at a time. Why don't we do $5 million at a time? It's just the logic of all or nothing. It makes no sense. We need to reduce the cost to the taxpayers. I end with this. So I end with saying, I wish that there's an outside audit of communications around the new land selection and an ethics review of the new site to be considered if this new school is continuing to be pushed down onto the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else online? Melissa Abercrombie?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's late, so let me see if I can get everything out after this meeting. I just want to say thank you. There were a couple of things I wanted to address. I heard somebody mention that basically an assumption that the regular taxpayer doesn't feel the effect of the change in our taxes, and we do. I am a regular taxpayer. I have a small business out of my home, and anything that changes with our finances, with our mortgage, we don't just write a check to the mortgage company and that's all that happens. We feel it. We know that the cost of everything is going up. So I hope that that's realized. It's not just the big ticket taxpayers, but it is us as well, the parents and the homeowners here. So sorry, it's late. In addition, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that there were issues that have been going on with the schools. The pre-K was flooded last year. During the Christmas break this year, the second grade was delayed when they went back to school because the pipes burst. There's issues going on with the school. So I hope everybody in the community also realizes that whether the taxes go up for the new schools, they're going to go up because there's repairs that still need to be made. So it boils down to where we want to put the money, and I'd like it to go to our students. I know that somebody mentioned timing, and I appreciate Brianna for mentioning if there is a delay and it's pushed out, then it, money, things cost more the longer we wait. Obviously we see that. So there's never a good time, but I hope that we realize that we need to put it towards our children. So the kids in our schools, we need to make sure that we're taking care of them. And it is going to be felt as taxpayer. I know that we're going to feel it, but I want to make sure that my children are going to a school that is brought up to the 21st century, that I don't have to worry about pipes bursting or it being too cold, or they have to take blankets because the heaters don't work well to heat their classroom. So if we could just remember that, and I appreciate all of y'all's time. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. What's that?
No other hands are up.
Anybody else online, raise your little yellow hand if you can. And if you cannot do that, unmute and call out your name, please. Is that everybody there? Or do you have to
No,
scroll
but
it?
when they
Oh, they
pop
moved to
top,
the
they raise
top. Oh, technology.
We've been doing it.
Last call for present to speak. All right. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So move. Second, please.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye and wave goodbye.
Aye.
Goodbye.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
4.
10:04.
And hands up.